For thousands of years, a hidden wisdom has circulated among the most prosperous Jewish communities in the world. It is not magic. It is not luck. It is Tzedakah, a spiritual principle deeply rooted in the quantum physics of abundance that completely transforms the relationship between giving and receiving. This audiobook reveals how the ancient practice of Tzedakah operates as a technology of consciousness, reprogramming your energetic field to resonate with the frequency of unlimited prosperity. Unlike Western charity, which is born from pity and creates separation, Tzedakah is cosmic justice in action, a recognition that you are a divine channel through which abundance flows naturally. Prepare to awaken the consciousness of abundance that has always lived within you, waiting only for the correct code to be activated. Chapter 1. The Awakening of Tzedakah Consciousness. There's a moment that changes everything. For Sarah, it happened on a Tuesday morning when she opened her bank statement and saw the same number she'd been staring at for 3 years. Not growing, not shrinking, just stuck. She had read every manifestation book, attended the seminars, created vision boards that covered her bedroom wall. She affirmed, she visualized, she believed, and yet nothing moved. The universe seemed to have her on mute. What Sarah didn't know that Tuesday morning was that she was asking for flow while living as a dam. She was trying to receive while her entire energetic system was locked in the posture of holding. Within 6 months of discovering what you're about to learn, Sarah's income had tripled. But more importantly, her entire relationship with money, giving, and receiving had fundamentally transformed. She had awakened to Tzedakah consciousness. Right now, as you listen to these words, you're standing at the threshold of the same awakening. And I need you to understand something crucial from the very beginning. This isn't another technique to add to your manifestation toolkit. This isn't about doing something new. This is about becoming someone different, someone who understands that prosperity isn't attracted, it's circulated, someone who knows that abundance doesn't come to you. It flows through you. The ancient Jewish sages understood something that modern manifestation teachings often miss entirely. They knew that the universe operates on circulation, not accumulation, and they encoded this wisdom into a single word, a single practice, a single revolutionary principle: Tzedakah. Most people hear the word Tzedakah and immediately translate it as charity. This translation isn't just incomplete, it's dangerously misleading. Charity comes from the Latin word caritas, meaning kindness or affection. It implies a choice, something extra, something you do when you're feeling generous. It creates a relationship between the superior giver and the inferior receiver. It emerges from pity, but tzedakah comes from the Hebrew word tzedek, which means justice or righteousness. Not kindness, not generosity, justice. This distinction isn't semantic. It's the difference between manipulation and alignment, between ego and truth, between spinning your wheels and actually moving forward. When you give charity, you're being nice. When you practice tzedakah, you're fulfilling cosmic law. You're participating in the fundamental structure of reality itself. Think about how water moves through nature. It falls as rain, nourishes the earth, flows into streams, gathers in rivers, returns to the ocean, evaporates into clouds, and falls again as rain. This cycle never stops. The water doesn't accumulate in one place thinking, "I've worked hard to get here, I'm staying put." If it did, that water would become stagnant, toxic, unusable. The health of the entire system depends on circulation. Your prosperity operates on the exact same principle. You are not a container designed to fill up and seal shut. You are a channel designed to receive and release, to take in and give out, to experience the continuous flow of universal abundance moving through your life. And here's what's fascinating. The moment you try to become a container instead of a channel, you block the very flow you're trying to capture. The sages who developed the wisdom of Tzedakah understood something that neuroscience is only now beginning to validate. Your brain doesn't distinguish between literal and symbolic truth. When you physically enact the principle of circulation by giving, when you take money from your hand and place it in someone else's hand, you are sending an unmistakable signal to your subconscious mind. You are declaring at the deepest level, I am not operating from scarcity. I am connected to an infinite source. I am a conduit of abundance. This isn't positive thinking. This is cellular reprogramming. Studies at the HeartMath Institute have shown that acts of genuine generosity create measurable coherence in your electromagnetic field. Your heart, which generates an electromagnetic field 5,000 times stronger than your brain, begins broadcasting a signal of abundance into the quantum field around you. You literally become a magnet for prosperity, not through wanting it, but through embodying the consciousness that generates it. But here's where most people stumble. They hear this principle, and immediately their scarcity programming activates. I'll practice Tzedakah when I have more money. This is like saying, I'll start breathing deeply when I have more oxygen in my lungs. You give in order to open the channel, not because the channel is already open. You practice Tzedakah especially when it feels uncomfortable, because that discomfort is the exact location of your limitation. That resistance you feel when you consider giving, that tightness in your chest, that voice that says, but what about me? That's not protecting you, that's imprisoning you. It's the voice of the poverty consciousness that has been running your financial reality from the shadows of your subconscious mind. Every time you override that voice and choose to give anyway, you weaken its grip. You reclaim your power. You remember who you really are. Let me tell you about David, a man who came to one of my workshops 3 years ago. He was drowning in debt, working 2 jobs, convinced that the universe had forgotten about him. When I introduced the concept of Tzedakah, he actually laughed. Not a joyful laugh, a bitter, cynical laugh. You want me to give money away? I don't have money to give away. That's why I'm here. But something shifted in him during that workshop. Maybe it was desperation. Maybe it was intuition. Maybe it was grace. He decided to try it, not with hundreds of dollars he didn't have, but with $5. He saw a homeless woman outside the workshop venue, and he gave her $5. It wasn't the amount that mattered. It was the internal shift that happened when he overrode his scarcity programming and gave anyway. He told me later that he felt something unlock in his chest, like a door he didn't know existed had suddenly opened. Within 2 weeks, a former colleague called him out of nowhere with a job opportunity that doubled his income. Within 6 months, his debt was gone. Within a year, he had started his own business. But when I asked him what the real transformation was, he didn't talk about the money. He said, I stopped believing I was broke. I stopped identifying as someone who doesn't have enough. I became someone who circulates abundance, and then abundance had somewhere to circulate to. This is the consciousness shift that Tzedakah creates. It moves you from the identity of someone who needs to the identity of someone who provides. And this shift in identity changes everything, because you don't attract what you want. You attract who you are. If your core identity is someone who lacks, the universe will perfectly match that frequency and give you experiences of lacking. But when your core identity becomes, someone who is a channel of abundance. The universe has no choice but to match that frequency instead. This isn't metaphysical speculation. This is how your reticular activating system works. This is how your subconscious mind filters and creates your reality. You cannot outmanifest your identity. You cannot use techniques to override who you fundamentally believe yourself to be. But you can change who you are. And Tzedakah is one of the most powerful tools for that transformation. The ancient rabbis taught that there are three partners in the creation of every human being: the Father, the Mother, and God. The Father provides the white matter, bones, sinews, tendons. The Mother provides the red matter, flesh, blood, skin. And God provides the soul, the consciousness, the divine spark. But they also taught something even more profound. When you practice Tzedakah, you become a partner with God in sustaining creation. You step into your role as a co-creator. You stop being a victim of circumstances and become an active participant in the flow of universal abundance. This isn't arrogance. This is your birthright. This is what you were designed for. You weren't created to beg the universe for scraps. You were created to be a distribution center of infinite supply. Here's what I want you to understand as you continue through this audiobook. Tzedakah is going to challenge everything you think you know about money, abundance, and prosperity. It's going to ask you to do things that feel counterintuitive, even scary. It's going to invite you to give when your rational mind is screaming at you to hold on tighter. And in those moments of resistance, in those moments of fear, you're going to have a choice. You can listen to the old programming, the programming of scarcity, of separation, of survival, or you can choose to step into a new identity, the identity of someone who trusts the flow, the identity of someone who knows, not just intellectually, but in every cell of their body, that the universe is infinitely abundant, and they are a perfect channel for that abundance. As you drift off to sleep tonight, I want you to feel into a new possibility. Imagine for a moment that you are not separate from the abundance you seek. Imagine that you are not outside looking in, hoping to be let into the club of prosperity. Imagine instead that you are already an integral part of the circulation system of universal wealth. You are already a channel. The question is not whether you can become one. You already are one. The only question is whether that channel is open or blocked. And Tzedakah is the practice that opens what has been closed, that clears what has been blocked, that restores the natural flow that is your birthright. You don't need to force anything. You don't need to make anything happen. You simply need to remove the obstacles you've unconsciously placed in the way of what wants to flow to you, through you, and from you. You are about to discover that giving isn't what you do after you become abundant. Giving is how you become abundant. This is the secret that has enriched Jewish communities for thousands of years. This is the principle that has survived every exile, every persecution, every attempt to suppress it, because it's not just a practice, it's a truth about how the universe actually works, a truth about who you really are, and that truth is about to set you free. Chapter 2. The Quantum Physics of Generosity. There's a laboratory in California where scientists have been measuring something extraordinary. They've been measuring the electromagnetic field of the human heart, and what they've discovered validates what mystics have known for thousands of years. Your heart is not just a pump. It's a broadcasting station. When you experience genuine emotions, particularly gratitude, compassion, and generosity, Your heart generates an electromagnetic signal that can be measured up to 10 feet away from your body. But here's what makes this revolutionary. That electromagnetic field doesn't just radiate outward into empty space. It interacts with the quantum field itself, the invisible matrix of infinite possibilities that physicists now agree underlies all of physical reality. Every time you give with an open heart, you're not just performing a good deed. You're literally reorganizing the probability patterns in the field of potential that surrounds you. You're becoming a sculptor of reality itself. Most people approach manifestation like they're placing an order with the universe. They visualize what they want. They affirm what they desire. They set intentions and wait for delivery. And then they wonder why their order never arrives. Here's what they're missing. The quantum field doesn't respond to your requests. It responds to your state of being. It doesn't hear your words. It reads your electromagnetic signature. And nothing changes your electromagnetic signature more dramatically than the act of giving. When you give, especially when giving requires you to override fear or scarcity programming, your heart immediately shifts into a state called coherence. This isn't poetic language. This is measurable science. Coherence means your heart rhythm pattern becomes smooth and ordered instead of chaotic and erratic. And when your heart enters coherence, something remarkable happens. Your brain waves synchronize with your heart rhythm, creating what neuroscientists call cardiocoherence. Your entire nervous system aligns, and in that moment of alignment, you become exponentially more powerful as a creator. Let me take you deeper into what's actually happening at the quantum level. Physicists have discovered that at the subatomic level, particles exist in a state of superposition. They exist as pure potential, as waves of probability, until they're observed. The famous double-slit experiment proved this conclusively. When electrons aren't being observed, they behave like waves, passing through both slits simultaneously. But the moment you observe them, they collapse into particles and choose one slit. The observer literally affects the outcome. Now, here's the connection most people miss. You are constantly observing your reality, and the state of consciousness from which you observe determines what collapses from the field of potential into your material experience. When you observe your reality from a state of lack, when your predominant feeling is, "I don't have enough," you collapse possibilities that match that frequency. You quite literally create more experiences of not having enough. But when you give, you shift into a completely different observational state. You're observing reality from abundance. You're saying with your actions, with your energy, with your entire being, "I have more than enough. I have so much that I can share it freely." And the quantum field has no choice but to match that observation and deliver experiences that confirm it. Think about the last time you gave something away and it felt amazing. Maybe you bought someone's coffee in line behind you, or you donated to a cause you believed in, or you helped a friend without expecting anything back. Remember that feeling? That expansion in your chest, that lightness, that sense of connection to something larger than yourself. That wasn't just an emotional response. That was your energy field expanding. Research at Princeton University's Peer Laboratory demonstrated that human consciousness can affect random number generators, actually influencing mechanical systems through intention alone. But the effect was strongest when the person was in an elevated emotional state. Coherence amplifies your creative power, and generosity is one of the fastest paths to coherence. When you give, you're not depleting your resources. You're amplifying your power to create more resources. You're tuning your instrument to the frequency where manifestation happens effortlessly. I want you to understand something crucial about energy and money. Money is not separate from the universal energy that creates worlds. Money is concentrated life force. It's crystallized attention, crystallized time, crystallized energy. And like all energy, it must flow to stay healthy and generative. In physics, there's a principle called the second law of thermodynamics, which states that closed systems tend toward entropy. They break down, they become disordered, they die. But open systems, systems that exchange energy with their environment, can grow increasingly complex and organized. They evolve. Your financial reality is the same. When you close your system, when you hold on tightly to every dollar, when you refuse to let money flow out of your life, you create a closed system that inevitably moves toward entropy. Your money becomes stagnant. Opportunities dry up. Creative solutions stop appearing. But when you practice Tzedakah, when you consciously circulate money out of your life, you create an open system. And open systems don't just survive. They thrive. They grow. They evolve into higher levels of complexity and abundance. There's a woman named Rebecca who experienced this principle in the most dramatic way. She had built a successful business over 15 years, but she ran it from a mindset of scarcity. Every expense felt like a threat. Every dollar going out felt like a loss. She paid her employees the minimum she could. She negotiated aggressively with vendors. She never donated to charity. I can't afford to be generous until I'm more successful, she told herself. And for 15 years, her business stayed exactly the same size. She worked harder and harder, but the numbers never changed. Then her father died, and in his will, she discovered he'd been donating 10% of his income to various causes for 40 years. She'd had no idea. At his funeral, person after person told her how her father had helped them, supported them, believed in them. She saw the legacy of circulation he'd left behind, and something cracked open in her. She decided to honor him by adopting his practice. She started giving 10% of her business revenue away. Her accountant thought she'd lost her mind. But within 3 months, she landed the biggest client in her company's history. Within a year, her revenue had doubled. Within 3 years, she'd built the business she'd been struggling to create for 15 years. When I asked her what changed, she said, I stopped trying to control the flow and started trusting it. And the moment I trusted it, it multiplied. This is the paradox that the rational mind cannot comprehend. You must give to receive. You must release to attract. You must empty to be filled. This paradox has been taught by every wisdom tradition, every mystical school, every enlightened teacher throughout history. Jesus said, "Give, and it will be given to you. Good measure, pressed down, shaken together, running over." The Buddha taught dana, the practice of generous giving. The Tao Te Ching says, the sage does not hoard. The more he helps others, the more he benefits himself. And the ancient Hebrews encoded this wisdom into Tzedakah. They weren't all teaching the same thing by coincidence. They were all describing the same universal law, the same fundamental principle of how energy moves through reality. And that principle is this: the universe rewards circulation, not accumulation. It rewards openness, not closure. It rewards trust, not fear. Now let's talk about what happens in your brain when you practice generous giving. Neuroscientists using fMRI technology have discovered that when you give money away, specific regions of your brain light up. The same regions that activate when you receive money or eat delicious food. Your brain literally experiences giving as rewarding. But here's what's even more fascinating. When giving is voluntary and intentional, when you choose to give rather than being pressured or obligated, the reward centers of your brain activate even more strongly than when you receive. Your brain is wired for generosity. Evolution has encoded this pattern into your neural architecture because humans who cooperate and share resources survive better than those who hoard. But we've been conditioned to override this natural wiring. We've been taught that resources are scarce, that we must compete rather than cooperate, that giving diminishes us. And this conditioning creates a conflict between your natural wiring and your learned patterns. This conflict shows up as stress, anxiety, and a chronic sense of not enoughness. When you practice Tzedakah, you're not learning something new. You're returning to your original programming. You're coming home to your true nature. Every time you give, you're creating new neural pathways. This is the principle of neuroplasticity. Your brain physically changes based on your repeated behaviors. If you repeatedly practice holding on, protecting, defending your resources, you strengthen the neural networks associated with scarcity and fear. Your brain becomes more efficient at seeing threats, at anticipating loss, at preparing for deprivation. You literally rewire yourself for poverty consciousness. But if you repeatedly practice giving, sharing, circulating resources, you strengthen completely different neural networks. You rewire yourself for abundance consciousness. Your brain becomes more efficient at spotting opportunities, at recognizing potential, at seeing possibilities for growth and expansion. This isn't just changing your thoughts. This is changing the physical structure of your brain. After just 8 weeks of consistent generosity practice, measurable changes appear in brain scans. The amygdala, your fear center, becomes less reactive. The prefrontal cortex, your center for complex thinking and decision-making, shows increased activity. You literally become a different person at the neurological level. But the transformation goes even deeper than your brain. Every cell in your body is surrounded by an electromagnetic field. Every cell is constantly sending and receiving signals, communicating with other cells and with the environment. When you live in a state of scarcity and fear, your cells receive stress signals. Cortisol floods your system. Your cells shift into protection mode. They close down, they defend, they prepare for threat. In this state, growth and regeneration slow down. Your body is literally aging faster because of your scarcity mindset. But when you practice generosity and shift into abundance consciousness, everything changes at the cellular level. Your cells receive safety signals. Oxytocin and dopamine flow through your system. Your cells open up. They communicate more efficiently. They regenerate more effectively. Studies have shown that people who regularly practice generosity have lower inflammation markers, stronger immune systems, and even longer telomeres, the protective caps on your chromosomes that determine cellular aging. You're not just changing your bank account when you practice Tzedakah. You're changing your biology. Here's an experiment I want you to consider. For the next 7 days, give something away every single day. It doesn't have to be money. It can be time, attention, a genuine compliment, a helping hand. But make it intentional. Make it conscious. And pay attention to what happens in your body when you give. Notice the shift in your chest. Notice the quality of your breathing. Notice your energy level. Most people discover that giving energizes them rather than depletes them. They feel more alive, more connected, more purposeful. This isn't psychological. This is energetic. You're opening channels that have been closed. You're allowing life force to flow through you instead of getting stuck inside you. And life force, always brings more life. Energy always attracts more energy. This is the fundamental law of the universe, and Tzedakah is the practice that aligns you with it. As you prepare for sleep tonight, I want you to imagine your body as a network of channels, like rivers flowing through a landscape. Some of these channels are wide open, allowing energy to flow freely. Others are narrow, constricted by fear and old programming. And some are completely blocked, dammed up by beliefs you've carried since childhood. Now imagine that every act of giving is like clearing debris from these channels. Every time you give, you remove another obstruction. The flow becomes stronger, faster, more powerful. And as the flow increases, it doesn't just move through you. It moves to you. The more you allow to flow out, the more the universe can flow in. You're not losing anything when you give. You're creating space for more. You're demonstrating your trust in the infinite nature of supply. You're declaring to every cell in your body, to every neuron in your brain, to every particle in the quantum field, I am abundant. I am a channel of prosperity. I am one with the infinite flow of universal wealth. And the universe, which is nothing but responsive energy, has no choice but to say yes to that declaration and make it true in your experience. This is not faith. This is physics. This is how reality actually works. And you're about to prove it to yourself. Chapter 3. The 8 Levels of Tzedakah, the Ladder of Transformation. In the 12th century, a physician and philosopher named Moses Maimonides sat down to decode the mystery of giving. He had studied the Torah, the Talmud, and the wisdom of countless sages before him. And what he discovered was revolutionary. Not all giving is created equal. Some acts of generosity create minimal transformation, while others catalyze complete metamorphosis of consciousness. Maimonides identified 8 distinct levels of tzedakah, 8 rungs on a ladder that ascends from basic charity to divine partnership. But here's what most people miss. This ladder isn't just describing different ways to give money. It's mapping the evolution of human consciousness itself. Each level represents a different state of being, a different vibrational frequency, a different relationship with abundance. And as you climb this ladder, you don't just change what you do. You change who you are. You literally reprogram your identity from someone who gives out of obligation or pity to someone who embodies the very principle of circulation itself. The first level, the lowest rung on this ladder, is giving reluctantly or with regret. This is when you give because you feel you should, because someone pressured you, because you'll look bad if you don't. Your hand extends with the money, but your heart contracts with resistance. You might give $1 to the person on the street corner, but inside you're thinking, they'll probably just waste it, or I can't really afford this, or why me? This level of giving actually creates more scarcity in your consciousness than if you hadn't given at all. Why? Because you're reinforcing the neural pathway of insufficiency. You're telling your subconscious, resources are so limited that giving them away causes me pain. You're practicing scarcity, not abundance. Your electromagnetic field contracts rather than expands. The quantum field reads your actual state, not your actions, and it delivers more experiences that match the feeling of deprivation. Now don't misunderstand. Even this level of giving has value in the world. That dollar still helps. But it doesn't transform you. It doesn't open the channels of abundance in your life, because your consciousness remains locked in the grip of not enough. The second level is giving cheerfully but inadequately. This is when you feel good about giving, when your heart is genuinely open, but you give less than you could or should based on your means. You tip 15% when you could afford $20. You donate $20 when you could donate $50. The emotion is right, but the commitment that is incomplete. This level reveals something important. You're still negotiating with abundance. You're still trying to control the flow, to manage the exchange, to protect yourself against some imagined future scarcity. There's a part of you that hasn't fully surrendered to the principle of circulation. And that part, that small voice of fear that says, "But save some for yourself," is the very mechanism that keeps you from experiencing the full force of universal supply. A man named Thomas practiced this level for years. He always gave to his church, always donated to causes he believed in, always helped friends when they asked. But he never gave as much as he felt called to give. There was always a calculation, always a reservation, and his financial life reflected that reservation. He always had enough, but never quite the abundance he desired. It wasn't until he moved up the ladder that everything shifted. The third level is giving adequately, but only after being asked. You give the right amount. You give with good feeling, but you wait for someone to approach you. You respond, rather than initiate. This level reveals something subtle, but significant about your consciousness. You're still placing yourself in a reactive, rather than creative position. You're still waiting for the universe to show you where the need is instead of actively seeking opportunities to circulate energy. There's nothing wrong with responding to requests. The world needs that. But when you only give in response to being asked, you're unconsciously positioning yourself as someone who needs to be activated by external circumstances. And that pattern doesn't just apply to giving. It shows up everywhere in your life. You wait for opportunities to come to you instead of creating them. You react to your reality instead of authoring it. The shift from this level to the next one is the shift from passive to active, from reactive to creative, from effect to cause. And that shift changes everything about how abundance flows to you. The fourth level is giving adequately before being asked, but in a way that the recipient knows who you are. You seek out opportunities to give. You notice needs and meet them without waiting to be approached. But you still reveal your identity as the giver. Your name goes on the donation. The person knows exactly who helped them. Now, there's nothing inherently wrong with this. Sometimes acknowledgement is appropriate, even necessary. But energetically, there's still a subtle thread of ego woven into the giving. There's still some part of you that wants recognition, that needs the other person to know what you did, that seeks validation or gratitude or status from your generosity. And that seeking, however subtle, creates a closed loop. You're giving in order to receive something, even if it's just acknowledgement. You're still operating in the paradigm of exchange, rather than the paradigm of pure circulation. A successful entrepreneur named Michelle practiced this level for years. She donated generously to charities, always made sure her company's contributions were publicly recognized, always enjoyed the thank you letters and the plaques on walls. She felt good about her giving, and she was genuinely helping people. But she noticed that the more publicly she gave, the more she seemed to need that public recognition. She had created a dependency on external validation, and that dependency was actually limiting the flow of abundance in her life, because she was unconsciously giving in order to get, rather than giving as an expression of her inherent abundance. The fifth level is giving anonymously to a known recipient. You know who you're helping, but they don't know who helped them. You leave the envelope of money on their doorstep. You pay their bill without telling them. You create the scholarship fund without putting your name on it. This is a quantum leap in consciousness. You've severed the need for recognition. You're giving purely for the sake of giving, purely for the joy of circulation, purely because it aligns with who you are. There's no expectation of return, no need for gratitude, no seeking of validation. And in this space of egoless giving, something extraordinary happens in your energetic field. You create a vacuum. When you give without needing anything back, not even acknowledgement, you demonstrate complete trust in the universe's ability to provide for you through other channels. And the universe rushes to fill that vacuum. Opportunities appear from unexpected sources. Money shows up in ways you never anticipated. The giving becomes a declaration of your abundance, and reality reorganizes itself to match that declaration. But you're not doing it for that reason. That's crucial. You're not being anonymous in order to get more. You're being anonymous because you've evolved beyond the need for external validation of your worth. The 6th level is giving to an unknown recipient in a way that you don't know who receives your gift. You donate to a general fund. You contribute to an organization serving many people. You give to a cause rather than a person. This level takes you even deeper into the consciousness of pure circulation. You're not just releasing the need for recognition. You're releasing attachment to the specific outcome of your giving. You're trusting the wisdom of the flow itself to direct your contribution to where it's needed most. You're operating as a pure channel, allowing universal intelligence to determine the destination of your gift. This is the consciousness of someone who has truly grasped that it's not about you. It's not about your preferences, your judgments, your assessments of who deserves help. It's about participating in the larger circulation of energy through the world. When you reach this level, you've transcended the ego's need to control not just the recognition, but the very impact of your giving. And in that transcendence, you tap into a much larger flow of abundance because you're no longer constraining it with your limited perspective. The 7th level is giving in a way that the recipient doesn't know who gave, and you don't know who received. Complete anonymity in both directions. This was traditionally accomplished through special funds, where donors would place money anonymously, and recipients would take money anonymously. No one knew who was giving or who was receiving. This level represents almost complete dissolution of the separate self in the act of giving. There's no giver and receiver. There's only the flow itself. You've become transparent to the abundance moving through you. You're not doing anything. You're allowing everything. This is the consciousness that the mystics speak of, the state where the illusion of separation dissolves, and you realize you're not an isolated being trying to get enough resources to survive, but rather an expression of the infinite source itself. Everything you have comes from that source. Everything you give returns to that source. You're simply the temporary steward, the momentary channel, the brief passage point for energy that belongs to no one and flows to everyone. When you touch this level of consciousness, even briefly, your entire relationship with money transforms. You stop grasping because there's nothing to grasp. You stop fearing because there's nothing to lose. You recognize yourself as the abundance you've been seeking. The 8th level, the highest rung on Maimonides' ladder, is not giving money at all. It's empowering someone to become self-sufficient. You give them a job. You teach them a skill. You lend them capital to start a business. You create a partnership where they can generate their own abundance. This level transcends charity entirely and enters the realm of partnership, of co-creation, of mutual elevation. You're not just circulating energy, you're multiplying it. You're not just meeting a temporary need, you're transforming someone's entire relationship with abundance. You're helping them climb the ladder themselves. This is the consciousness of divine partnership, where you recognize that the highest form of giving is not to make someone dependent on your generosity, but to awaken their own creative power. This is what God does. Not give you fish, but awaken you to the fact that you are the ocean itself. When you practice this level of tzedakah, you're operating at the frequency of pure creation. You're not just managing resources, you're generating new capacity for abundance in the world. And the quantum field responds to this creative consciousness by flooding your life with opportunities, ideas, connections, and resources that multiply exponentially. Here's what I need you to understand. This ladder isn't a moral hierarchy where you should feel guilty for being on a lower rung. This is a map of consciousness evolution. You are exactly where you are, and that's perfect. The point isn't to judge yourself, but to recognize where you are and see where you can grow. Maybe right now you're on the first or second level. You give, but it's hard, or you give less than you could. That's okay. That's your starting point. The practice of tzedakah isn't about immediately jumping to the 8th level. It's about consciously moving up one rung at a time, stretching yourself slightly beyond your comfort zone, practicing a higher level of consciousness until it becomes natural, until it becomes who you are. Each time you move up even one level, you reprogram your subconscious mind. You install new beliefs about your worthiness, your abundance, your connection to infinite supply. You literally change your identity. And as your identity changes, your reality must change to match it. Let me tell you what happened to Thomas, the man I mentioned earlier, who was stuck on the 2nd level. He recognized himself on this ladder, saw exactly where he was, and made a decision. He was going to climb. He started practicing the 3rd level, giving adequately when asked. Then he pushed himself to the 4th level, actively seeking opportunities to give without waiting to be asked. It was uncomfortable. His scarcity programming screamed at him, but he kept practicing. Then he started giving anonymously, moving to the 5th level. He would randomly pay for people's groceries, leave generous tips for servers without them knowing who left it, donate to funds without putting his name on anything. And as he climbed this ladder, something remarkable happened. His business, which had been stagnant for years, suddenly started growing. New clients appeared. Old clients increased their orders. Opportunities he couldn't have predicted opened up. Within 2 years of starting this practice, his income had tripled. But when I asked him what the real transformation was, he said something I'll never forget. I stopped being afraid of money leaving me. I realized I'm not the source. I'm the channel, and channels don't run dry. They just flow. As you drift into sleep tonight, I want you to identify where you are on this ladder. Not where you wish you were, not where you think you should be, but where you honestly are right now in your giving practice. See yourself standing on that rung. Feel the solidity of it beneath your feet. And then, look up. See the next rung above you. It's not far away. It's just one step higher. One level of consciousness more evolved. One degree of trust deeper. And know that you can reach it. You can stretch yourself to practice at that higher level. Not perfectly, not all at once, but progressively, consistently, intentionally. Each time you give from a higher level of consciousness, you strengthen that level within yourself. You make it more natural, more automatic, more genuinely you. You climb this ladder not through force, but through practice, not through should, but through choice, not through guilt, but through growth. And each rung you ascend brings you closer to the truth of who you really are. an infinite being, temporarily expressing as a finite form, a channel of divine abundance, a partner in the continuous creation of prosperity throughout all existence. The ladder is before you. The invitation is clear. All that's required is your next step upward. Chapter 4. Reprogramming the subconscious through practice. Your subconscious mind is running the show. Right now, as you listen to these words, 95% of your behavior is being controlled by programs installed in the first 7 years of your life. You didn't choose these programs. You absorbed them from your parents, from your culture, from the experiences that shaped your early world. And many of these programs, particularly around money and abundance, are working directly against what you consciously want to create. You can affirm abundance all day long. You can visualize wealth. You can set intentions and create vision boards. But if your subconscious programming says money is hard to get, or rich people are greedy, or there's never enough, then your subconscious will win every single time. It's not a fair fight. Your conscious mind processes about 40 bits of information per second. Your subconscious processes 40 million bits per second. It's literally 1,000,000 times more powerful. So the question isn't whether you can override your subconscious programming with willpower. You can't. The question is, how do you reprogram it? And the answer is both ancient and revolutionary, through consistent, repetitive practice that creates new neural pathways. Tzedakah isn't just a spiritual principle or a good deed. It's a reprogramming tool, a way to install new operating software in the depths of your mind. Let me explain how subconscious programming actually works. Your subconscious mind learns through repetition and emotion. It doesn't understand logic or reason. It only understands patterns and feelings. When you were a child and you heard your parents argue about money, when you felt the tension in the house when bills came due, when you absorbed the anxiety in your mother's voice when she said, "We can't afford that," your subconscious mind recorded all of it, not as thoughts, but as neural patterns, as emotional imprints, as electromagnetic signatures in your cells. And those recordings became programs that run automatically throughout your life. Every time you think about money now, those old programs activate. The anxiety surfaces, the contraction happens, the fear triggers, and you act from those programs without even realizing it. You sabotage opportunities. You undercharge for your work. You make decisions from scarcity even while consciously wanting abundance. This is why most people's financial reality doesn't match their conscious desires. They're trying to create from the conscious mind, while the subconscious mind is broadcasting the opposite signal into the quantum field. Here's where tzedakah becomes transformative. When you physically give money away, you're not just performing an external action. You're creating a direct confrontation with your scarcity programming. Every time you override the voice that says, "Hold on, you might need that." Every time you give despite the contraction in your chest, every time you choose circulation over accumulation, you're weakening the old neural pathways and building new ones. Neuroscience has proven this through studies on neuroplasticity, the brain's ability to rewire itself based on repeated behavior. When you practice a new behavior consistently, your brain literally creates new connections between neurons. The first few times you do it, it feels unnatural, forced, uncomfortable. That's because you're forging a new path through dense forest. But with repetition, that path becomes a trail, then a road, then a highway. Eventually, the new behavior becomes automatic. It becomes your new default program. And when giving becomes your default program, When circulation becomes more natural than hoarding, your entire electromagnetic signature changes. You become a match for abundance because abundance is your actual state of being, not something you're trying to attract. There's a reason the ancient sages emphasized regular, consistent Tzedakah practice rather than occasional large donations. They understood something about human consciousness that modern psychology is only now confirming. Transformation happens through steady repetition, not dramatic gestures. You can give away $1,000 once and feel good about it, but that single act won't reprogram decades of scarcity conditioning. However, if you give away $10 every single day for 100 days, you'll literally rewire your brain. Each small act of giving sends a signal to your subconscious. We have enough. We are safe. We trust the flow. And your subconscious, which only understands repetition and emotion, begins to accept this new program. It starts to release the grip of scarcity. The anxiety around money begins to dissolve. New possibilities start appearing in your awareness because your reticular activating system, the filter that determines what you notice in your environment, has been reprogrammed to look for abundance instead of threat. I want to tell you about a woman named Patricia who experienced this transformation firsthand. She came from a family where poverty was a badge of honor. Her grandmother used to say, "We may not have much, but we're honest people," as if wealth and integrity were mutually exclusive. Patricia internalized this deeply. Even after she became successful in her career, she couldn't shake a constant underlying anxiety about money. She checked her bank balance multiple times a day. She agonized over every purchase. She felt guilty when she spent money on anything beyond bare necessities. Consciously, she wanted to relax and enjoy her abundance. Subconsciously, she was still that little girl whose grandmother equated poverty with virtue. I suggested she start a daily Tzedakah practice. Not a large amount, just $5 every single day, given to someone or something she genuinely cared about. The first week was torture for her. Every day that $5 felt like she was ripping something from her chest. Her scarcity programming was screaming, but she committed to 90 days. By week 3, the resistance began softening. By week 6, she actually looked forward to it. By week 12, something remarkable had happened. She realized she hadn't checked her bank balance in 2 weeks. The obsessive anxiety had dissolved. She had reprogrammed her subconscious relationship with money through the simple, consistent practice of letting it flow out of her life. The mechanism behind this reprogramming is elegant. Your subconscious mind is always monitoring your behavior for evidence of what's true. When your actions consistently contradict an old belief, the subconscious eventually updates the belief to match the behavior. If your old belief says, "Money is scarce and must be hoarded," but your consistent behavior demonstrates, "Money flows freely and I give it away regularly," your subconscious eventually has to reconcile this contradiction, and it does so by updating the belief. This is the principle behind every behavioral change technique that actually works. You can't think your way into a new belief, but you can act your way into one. Tzedakah leverages this principle perfectly because it forces you to take action that directly contradicts scarcity programming. Every act of giving is a vote for a new belief system. Every dollar you circulate is a declaration of trust in abundance, and your subconscious is counting the votes. But here's what makes Tzedakah even more powerful than other reprogramming techniques. It engages emotion. Remember, your subconscious learns through repetition and emotion. Most people try to reprogram through affirmations alone, repeating words without feeling. But words without emotion are just noise to the subconscious. They bounce off the surface without penetrating. Tzedakah, on the other hand, inherently activates emotion. When you give to a cause you care about, when you help someone in need, when you support something you believe in, you feel something. Maybe it's joy, maybe it's compassion, maybe it's a sense of purpose or connection. Whatever the emotion is, it's real. And that emotional charge carries your new programming deep into your subconscious mind. You're not just saying, "I am abundant." You're feeling abundance in your body as you experience the joy of giving. You're not just thinking, "I trust the universe." You're demonstrating that trust through action and experiencing the emotional shift that comes with it. The combination of consistent action plus genuine emotion is the formula for rapid subconscious reprogramming. There's another layer to this that most people miss. Tzedakah reprograms not just your beliefs about money, but your core beliefs about yourself. Deep in your subconscious, you have a self-concept, an identity, and that identity determines everything you experience. If your identity is someone who struggles financially, the universe will deliver experiences that confirm that identity. If your identity is someone who never has quite enough, reality will perpetually arrange itself to match that truth. But when you consistently practice tzedakah, especially when you move up the ladder we discussed in the previous chapter, your identity begins to shift. You start to see yourself differently, not as someone who needs, but as someone who provides, not as someone who lacks, but as someone who circulates, not as a victim of circumstances, but as a creator of flow. This shift in identity is the most powerful transformation possible because identity determines destiny. You literally cannot outperform your self-concept, but you can change your self-concept through deliberate practice, and tzedakah is one of the most direct paths to that change. Let me share something that might surprise you. Research in the field of psychoneuroimmunology has shown that your beliefs literally affect your biology. Your thoughts create chemical cascades in your body. When you believe you're unsafe or lacking, your body produces cortisol and adrenaline, stress hormones that shut down growth and regeneration. Your cells go into survival mode. But when you believe you're safe and abundant, your body produces oxytocin, dopamine, and other chemicals that promote healing, growth, and vitality. Your cells go into thriving mode. Now here's the connection. Every time you practice tzedakah, every time you override scarcity and choose giving, you send a powerful signal to your body that you are safe. You're demonstrating that you have more than enough, and your body responds by shifting out of survival mode and into creation mode. Your immune system strengthens, your energy increases, your mental clarity improves. You're not just changing your financial reality, you're changing your health, your vitality, your very life force. Because everything is connected, your beliefs about money are inseparable from your beliefs about safety, worthiness, and your place in the universe. The ancient Kabbalists taught something profound. The physical world is a mirror of consciousness. Whatever exists in your inner world must eventually manifest in your outer world. If you want to change what's in the mirror, you don't try to rearrange the reflection. You change what's standing in front of the mirror. You change your consciousness, and consciousness changes through practice. This is why spiritual traditions across the world emphasize daily practice, daily ritual, daily commitment. It's not about being religious. It's about understanding how consciousness works. One profound insight doesn't transform you. One moment of clarity doesn't reprogram decades of conditioning. But one small practice, repeated daily, consistently, with intention and emotion, rewires everything. Tzedakah is that practice. It's simple enough to do every day. It's concrete enough to create real change. And it's powerful enough to transform your deepest programming about abundance, worthiness, and your relationship with the infinite. As you prepare for sleep tonight, I want you to make a commitment. Not a huge, overwhelming commitment that you'll abandon in 3 days. A small, sustainable commitment that you can keep. Decide right now on an amount you'll give every single day for the next 30 days. It could be $1. It could be $5. It could be whatever feels like a stretch, but not a break. The amount doesn't matter. The consistency does. The repetition does. The daily practice of overriding scarcity and choosing flow does. Each day for the next 30 days, you'll give that amount to someone or something. You'll feel whatever resistance comes up. You'll notice the old programming activating, and you'll give anyway. You'll choose your new identity over your old conditioning. You'll vote for abundance instead of scarcity. And day by day, dollar by dollar, you'll literally rewire your subconscious mind. You'll install new neural pathways. You'll create new electromagnetic patterns in your cells. You'll become a different person, not through willpower or positive thinking, but through the ancient proven technology of conscious practice. Tzedakah isn't just something you do. It's how you transform who you are. And who you are determines everything you experience. The practice is simple. The transformation is profound. Your next 30 days begin tomorrow. And with each day of practice, you step further into the truth of your abundant nature. Chapter 5. The Field of Shepa. Connecting to the infinite flow. There's a word in Hebrew that most people have never heard, yet it describes the most important force in the universe. The word is Shepa. It means divine flow, divine abundance, the continuous outpouring of creative energy from the source of all existence. The ancient Kabbalists taught that the entire universe is organized as a system of channels through which Shepa constantly flows. From the highest spiritual realms down through progressively denser levels of reality, this divine energy pours forth without ceasing, animating everything, sustaining everything, creating everything. And here's the revolutionary part. You are not outside this system looking in. You are an integral part of it. You were designed, from the very foundation of your being, to be a channel through which Shepa flows into the world. Not a reservoir, not a container, a channel. And the moment you understand this, the moment you align yourself with this truth, everything about your experience of abundance transforms instantaneously. Imagine for a moment that you're standing beside a river. The water is flowing past you, clear and abundant, moving from somewhere upstream toward somewhere downstream. Now you have a choice. You can try to dam up the river, capturing as much water as possible for yourself, creating a private reservoir, or you can position yourself in the flow, allowing the water to move through you, drawing from it what you need while letting the rest continue on its journey. Which position creates more security? Which creates more abundance? Most people, conditioned by scarcity consciousness, instinctively want to build the dam. They want to capture and hold. But here's what happens when you dam a river. The water becomes stagnant. It stops being living water. Algae grows. Insects breed. The very thing you tried to preserve by holding it becomes toxic through the act of holding. Meanwhile, the river upstream keeps flowing, but now it's flowing around you, finding other channels, other paths, other people who are willing to let it move through them. You've cut yourself off from the source by trying to capture its manifestation. This is exactly what happens with money, with abundance, with every form of energy in your life. The universe is designed for flow, for circulation, for constant movement. Shepa never stops pouring forth from the divine source. It's infinite, it's inexhaustible, but it can only flow to you, through you. The moment you try to make yourself the end point, the moment you try to accumulate and hold, you block the channel. You become a dam instead of a conduit. And yes, you might accumulate some water behind your dam, but that accumulated water is all you'll ever have, and it will gradually become stagnant. Meanwhile, people who understand the principle of flow, people who position themselves as channels rather than containers, experience an endless river of abundance moving through their lives. They always have what they need, because they're connected to the source itself, not just to what they manage to capture from it. The Kabbalists mapped this system with extraordinary precision. They described 10 sephirot, 10 emanations or channels through which divine energy descends from pure infinite consciousness into material reality. Each sephira represents a different quality of divine energy: wisdom, understanding, mercy, strength, beauty. And these sephirot are not separate things. They're aspects of one continuous flow, one unified system. The energy that flows through the highest sephira is the same energy that flows through the lowest. It just takes different forms, different expressions, different frequencies as it descends. And human beings, according to this ancient wisdom, exist at a unique intersection point in this system. We have access to both spiritual and material realms. We can receive from above and give below. We can draw Shepa from higher dimensions of consciousness and channel it into physical manifestation. This is our purpose. This is our design. We are meant to be transformers, taking infinite spiritual potential and grounding it into tangible reality. But here's what most people do instead. They focus entirely on the material level. They see only the physical money, the physical resources, the physical things. And at the physical level, everything appears finite. There's only so much money in your bank account. There's only so much time in your day. There's only so much energy in your body. And when you perceive from this limited perspective, scarcity seems like objective truth. Of course you need to hold on tightly. Of course you need to protect what you have. Of course, giving means losing. But this perception is based on a fundamental misunderstanding of reality. You're looking at the faucet and thinking that's the source of the water. You're looking at your bank account and thinking that's the source of your abundance. It's not. Your bank account is just the faucet. The source is Shepa, the infinite flow of divine creativity that has been pouring forth since before the universe began and will continue long after the stars burn out. And you have direct access to that source. Let me tell you about a man named Jacob who discovered this truth in the most unlikely circumstances. Jacob was a successful attorney who had built his entire life on control, strategy, and accumulation. He worked 80-hour weeks. He maximized every billable hour. He invested aggressively. He built a portfolio worth millions. And then, in one catastrophic month, he lost almost everything. A market crash wiped out most of his investments. A malpractice suit, completely unfounded but expensive to defend, drained his reserves. Within weeks, he went from feeling secure to feeling terrified. He had defined himself by what he had accumulated, and now the accumulation was gone. In his desperation, he found himself in a small synagogue, listening to an old rabbi teach about Shepa. The rabbi said something that penetrated Jacob's panic. You think you lost your security, but you never had security in what you accumulated. Security comes from being connected to the source, not from capturing its overflow. Something cracked open in Jacob that night. He realized he had spent 20 years building a dam and calling it success. He had cut himself off from the flow by trying to control it. Jacob made a radical decision. With what little money he had left, he started practicing Tzedakah daily. Not small, comfortable amounts. He gave away 10% of every dollar that came in, even when he had no idea where the next dollar would come from. His rational mind screamed that this was insane. But something deeper in him knew he was finally doing the sane thing, the true thing. He was positioning himself as a channel instead of a container. And within 3 months, something extraordinary happened. A former client called with a case that led to the biggest fee of Jacob's career. An investment he had written off as worthless suddenly became valuable again. Opportunities appeared from directions he never could have predicted. Within a year, he had not only recovered financially, but exceeded his previous net worth. But when I talked to him about it, he wasn't most excited about the money. He was excited about the transformation in his consciousness. He said, "I used to wake up every morning thinking, what do I need to protect today? Now I wake up thinking, what can I give today?" And somehow, in that shift, I have more than I ever had when I was trying to hold on to everything. This is the paradox of Shefa. The more you try to capture it, the less you have. The more you allow it to flow through you, the more you experience. It defies logic. It contradicts everything the rational mind believes about resources and security. But it's the fundamental law of the universe. Energy that flows stays alive, stays powerful, stays generative. Energy that stagnates dies. This is true in nature. Water that flows is fresh. Water that sits becomes a swamp. This is true in your body. Blood that circulates brings life. Blood that clots brings death. This is true in relationships. Love that flows deepens and grows. Love that grasps and holds suffocates and dies. And this is true in abundance. Money that circulates multiplies. Money that hoards diminishes. Not because the physical amount changes, but because your relationship with the source changes. When you circulate, you stay connected to the infinite. When you hoard, you disconnect and rely on the finite. The practice of Tzedakah is the technology for maintaining your connection to Shefa. Every time you give, you're declaring to the universe, I am a channel, not a container. I trust the source, not just the current manifestation. I know that what flows out will be replaced because I'm connected to the infinite. And the universe, which is nothing but intelligent energy responding to your frequency, says yes to that declaration. It confirms your trust by sending more, not because you manipulated it or earned it or deserved it, but because you aligned with how it actually works. You positioned yourself correctly in the flow. Think of it like this. If you want water from a river, you don't stand on the banks, reaching out and pulling water to you, one handful at a time. You step into the river and let it flow around you, through you, carrying you along. Tzedakah is how you step into the river of Shefa. It's how you stop standing on the bank, trying to control and manage and protect, and start surrendering to the infinitely abundant flow that has always been there, waiting for you to trust it. Now here's something crucial that the Kabbalists understood. The flow of Shefa is not random or arbitrary. It follows precise spiritual laws, just as gravity and electromagnetism follow precise physical laws. One of the most important of these laws is the law of reciprocity. What you give out must return to you, multiplied. not because the universe is being nice or rewarding good behavior, but because of how energy actually works. When you give, you create a vacuum in your energy field. Nature abhors a vacuum. The universe rushes to fill that empty space. But it doesn't just fill it with the equivalent of what you gave. It fills it with more. Because the universe doesn't think in terms of scarcity or conservation. It thinks in terms of abundance and expansion. This is why every spiritual tradition teaches some version of give and you shall receive. Jesus taught it. Buddha taught it. Krishna taught it. Muhammad taught it. Lao Tzu taught it. They weren't all teaching morality. They were teaching physics, spiritual physics, the laws that govern how consciousness creates reality. But there's a critical understanding here that prevents this from becoming manipulative or transactional. You cannot give in order to receive and expect this law to work. The moment your giving becomes a strategy to get more, you've collapsed back into ego, back into separation, back into the limited consciousness that blocks the flow. The giving must be genuine. It must come from the recognition that you are already one with the infinite source, already abundant, already complete. You give not to get, but because giving is your nature when you're connected to Shepa. It's the natural overflow of being plugged into infinite creativity. When you're a channel, giving isn't a sacrifice. It's an expression. It's not depletion. It's circulation. And it's in that purity of giving, that egoless participation in the flow, that the law of reciprocity activates most powerfully. The universe doesn't respond to your strategy. It responds to your state of being. There's a teaching in the Talmud that says, when you give Tzedakah, you should give with a cheerful countenance, with a smile, with warmth. It's not enough to just hand over the money. The energy you give it with matters. The consciousness you're in matters. Because what you're really giving is not the money. You're giving your energy, your frequency, your vibrational signature, and that signature either aligns with Shefa or it doesn't. If you give with resentment, with resistance, with a sense of obligation or loss, you're not really giving. You're protecting yourself while going through the motions. Your energy field is contracted, not expanded. You're still operating as a dam. You're just letting a little water through grudgingly. But when you give with joy, with genuine care, with the feeling of abundance in your chest, you're wide open. You're a clear channel, and Shepa flows through you like a river through an open valley, unobstructed, powerful, life-giving. I want you to feel into something right now. Imagine that there's a golden light above your head, infinitely bright, infinitely warm, infinitely abundant. This is Shefa, the divine flow of creative energy. Now imagine that this light wants to flow down through you. It wants to enter through the crown of your head, flow through your heart, and out through your hands into the world. But between your head and your heart, there are obstructions. These are your fears, your limiting beliefs, your scarcity programming. Every time you've thought, there's not enough, you've placed a stone in this channel. Every time you've held back from giving because you were afraid, you've built the channel a little more narrow, and now the light can only trickle through when it wants to pour. Tzedakah is the practice of removing these obstructions, one by one. Each act of giving dissolves a fear. Each circulation of resources clears the channel a little more. Each override of scarcity programming removes another stone. And as the channel clears, the flow increases. Not because you're getting more from the source is already infinite, but because you're removing the blocks that were limiting how much could move through you. The ancient sages taught that there are 70 faces to the Torah, 70 levels of interpretation, 70 ways to understand each teaching. But there's one interpretation of Shepa that I find particularly profound. Shepa is not something God gives to creation. Shepa is God giving God's self. It's the divine nature continuously pouring itself into manifestation, continuously offering itself as the substance of all reality. Everything that exists is made of Shepa. The stars, the trees, your body, your breath, your thoughts, your money. It's all divine energy in different forms. And when you practice Tzedakah, when you give freely and joyfully, you're participating in God's own nature. You're doing what the divine does, continuously giving itself away, continuously creating, continuously pouring forth abundance, without holding back. You're not just following a commandment or a spiritual practice. You're becoming like the Source itself. And in that becoming, you access the infinite creative power of the Source. As you drift toward sleep tonight, I want you to visualize yourself standing in a river. Feel the water flowing around your legs. It's warm, it's clear, it's abundant beyond measure. This is Shepa, and you're standing in the middle of it. It's been flowing your entire life. It was flowing before you were born, and it will flow after you're gone. It's always been there. You've just been standing on the bank, watching it, trying to capture it in buckets, when all you needed to do was step in. Now, as you stand in this river, imagine reaching down and scooping up some water. You lift it up and pour it over someone who needs it. Maybe it's someone you know. Maybe it's a stranger. Maybe it's a cause you care about. And as you pour that water out, you notice something. The river immediately flows in to fill the space where that water was. You didn't lose anything. The river didn't decrease. In fact, you feel more water swirling around you now, more flow, more movement. So you scoop again, and pour again, and again the river fills the space. You realize you could do this forever. You could give away water endlessly, and the river would never run out. Because you're not giving away your water, you're giving away the river's water. You're just the channel through which it flows from abundance to need, from source to manifestation, from the infinite to the finite. This is your true nature. This is who you've always been. A channel of Shepa, a conduit of divine abundance. And tomorrow when you wake, you'll remember this truth. You'll step into the river again, and you'll give, not from your limited resources, but from the infinite flow that is your birthright and your nature. Chapter 6. Maser. The power of the sacred tenth. There's a number that appears throughout sacred texts, across cultures, throughout history, with such consistency that it cannot be coincidental. The number is 10, or more precisely, 1/10. The ancient Hebrews called it Maser, which literally means a 10th portion. The practice is simple. You give away 10% of everything you receive before you do anything else with it. Not after you pay your bills. Not after you take care of your needs. First, right off the top, 10% goes back into circulation immediately. And this practice, this seemingly simple mathematical formula, contains a technology so powerful that it has sustained Jewish communities through thousands of years of exile, persecution, and adversity. It has created wealth, preserved culture, and transmitted abundance across generations. But Maser is not just a Jewish practice. The ancient Babylonians tithed to their temples. The Egyptians gave 1/10 to the pharaoh. Indigenous cultures throughout the world have practiced giving back a portion of every harvest. Why? Because there's something about this specific percentage this specific proportion that creates resonance with the fundamental frequencies of abundance in the universe itself. Let me explain what I mean by resonance. In physics, resonance occurs when a system is able to oscillate at greater amplitude at specific frequencies. When you strike a tuning fork at 1440 Hz, it will cause other objects tuned to that same frequency to vibrate in sympathy. The frequency matches and energy transfers effortlessly. The universe operates on frequencies. Everything is vibration. Matter is just energy vibrating at different rates. And consciousness, intention, the energetic signature you're broadcasting, these all have frequencies too. When your frequency matches the frequency of what you desire, manifestation happens effortlessly. It's not magic, it's resonance, and the practice of giving exactly 10% creates a specific frequency that resonates perfectly with the universal frequency of abundance. It's like tuning your instrument to the orchestra of infinite supply. Below 10%, you're slightly out of tune. Above 10% might be generous, but 10% is the sweet spot, the harmonic that aligns you most perfectly with the flow. The number 10 itself holds deep significance in Jewish mysticism. There are 10 Sephirot, the 10 emanations of divine energy we discussed in the previous chapter. There are 10 commandments. God created the world with 10 utterances. The minimum number for a prayer quorum, a minyan, is 10 people. 10 represents completion, wholeness, the full cycle of manifestation from spiritual intention to material reality. When you give a tenth, you're not just giving an arbitrary percentage. You're participating in a cosmic pattern, a sacred geometry that's woven into the fabric of creation itself. You're declaring through your action, I recognize that everything I have comes from the source. I honor the pattern of creation. I align myself with the divine proportion. And the universe, which is fundamentally mathematical, fundamentally ordered, fundamentally responsive to pattern and proportion, recognizes your alignment and responds accordingly. Now I know what might be going through your mind right now. 10% feels like a lot. Especially if you're struggling financially, if you're in debt, if you're not sure how you'll make it through the month. Your rational mind is calculating. If I give away 10%, I'll have even less. I can't afford that. And this is precisely the moment where transformation becomes possible. Because that fear, that calculation, that contraction, that's your scarcity programming talking. That's the old operating system that has been running your financial reality and keeping you stuck exactly where you are. The practice of Maser is designed to confront this programming directly. It asks you to do something that makes absolutely no logical sense from the perspective of scarcity. It asks you to give away money you can't afford to give away. And in that act of defiance against your conditioning, in that leap of faith beyond your fear, you break the pattern. You interrupt the program. You create a space for something new to emerge. Let me tell you about Rachel, a single mother of 3 who was working 2 jobs and still barely keeping her head above water. She had credit card debt, student loans, and a car that was one breakdown away from leaving her stranded. When she heard about Maser, she literally laughed. I can't even afford to buy my kids new shoes, she said. You want me to give away 10% of what I make? That's insane. But something in her was desperate enough to try insane. She was tired of the constant anxiety, the endless scrambling, the feeling that she was running as fast as she could and still falling behind. So she made a decision. She calculated 10% of her net income and set up an automatic transfer to go out the day she got paid, before she could think about it, before she could talk herself out of it. The money went to her local food bank, to a scholarship fund for kids in her neighborhood, to causes she cared about. The first month was terrifying. She had to get creative with meals. She had to say no to things she wanted to say yes to, but she didn't break her commitment. By the third month, something shifted. Rachel got a call from her employer about a position she hadn't even applied for, a management role with a 30% pay increase. By the sixth month, an old friend she hadn't talked to in years reached out with a freelance opportunity that brought in extra income. By the ninth month, a relative she barely knew passed away and left her a small inheritance that wiped out half her debt. Within a year, Rachel was not only financially stable, but actually building savings for the first time in her adult life. When I asked her what she thought made the difference, she said something profound. "I think when I started giving that 10%, I was telling the universe a different story about who I was. I was saying, I'm someone who has enough to give, even though I didn't feel like I had enough. And somehow, the universe started agreeing with that story instead of my old story of never having enough." Rachel had stumbled onto a fundamental truth. Your story about yourself creates your reality, and Maser is a way of authoring a new story through action. The ancient rabbis taught that Maser is not really giving, it's returning. They said that everything you have already belongs to God, to the universe, to the source. You're just a temporary steward. The first 10% is acknowledging this truth. It's saying, I recognize that this abundance came through me, not from me. I'm not the source, I'm the channel. And I honor the source by returning a portion to continue the cycle of blessing. This perspective completely transforms the psychology of giving. You're not sacrificing something that's yours. You're fulfilling your role in the cosmic economy. You're being a good steward, and there's something deeply satisfying about fulfilling your purpose, about operating according to your design. When you give your Maser, there's a rightness to it, a click of alignment, a sense of, this is how it's supposed to work. Your nervous system relaxes, your energy field expands. You feel like you're finally working with the universe instead of against it. There's also a fascinating mathematical principle at work in Maser that most people overlook. When you give 10%, you're left with 90%. But 90% with the blessing of alignment is worth more than 100% with the curse of misalignment. Have you ever noticed that some people earn very little, but somehow always have what they need? And other people earn a fortune but never seem to have enough? The difference isn't the amount, it's the frequency. Money that's blessed, money that's in alignment with universal law, money that flows through a clear channel, multiplies in ways that defy mathematical logic. Rabbi Yochanan taught in the Talmud, "Test me in this," says God. "Give your tithes, and see if I will not open the windows of heaven and pour out blessing until there is no room to receive it." This is the only place in the entire Torah where God says, "Test me." Why? Because the principle is so reliable, so mathematically precise, that it can be tested and verified. You don't have to believe it on faith. You can prove it through practice. Now let's talk about the mechanics of how to practice Maser, because implementation matters. The traditional teaching is that you calculate 10% of your increase, your income, whatever comes to you. If you earn $3,000, you give $300. If you earn $500, you give $50. It's proportional, which means it's accessible at every income level. You're not giving what you can't afford. You're giving exactly in proportion to what you receive. The second principle is that it goes out first, before anything else. Not from what's left over after expenses, not from your discretionary income. First. This is crucial because it establishes the priority in your consciousness. It says, Circulation is more important than accumulation. Connection to the source is more important than temporary security. When you pay yourself first, you're operating from scarcity. When you give first, you're operating from abundance. The third principle is consistency. Maser isn't a one-time donation. It's a practice, a discipline, a way of life. You do it every time money comes in, every paycheck, every gift, every unexpected windfall. You immediately calculate the 10% and set it aside for giving. This consistency creates a rhythm, a pattern in your energy field that the universe recognizes and matches. It's like breathing. You don't breathe once and then stop. You breathe consistently, rhythmically, in and out, in and out. Maser is financial breathing. Money in, 10% out. Money in, 10% out. This rhythm keeps your channels open, keeps the energy moving, prevents stagnation and blockage. And just as consistent breathing keeps you alive and healthy, consistent maser keeps your prosperity alive and healthy. There's a question that often comes up. Where should the maser go? The traditional answer is that it should go to support Torah study, to help the poor, to sustain the community. In modern terms, this translates to supporting education, helping those in need, contributing to causes that elevate consciousness and reduce suffering. But here's what's important. The maser should go to something you genuinely care about. It should go where your heart is engaged, where you feel connection and meaning. Because remember, it's not just the money that creates the effect. It's the energy you give it with. If you're donating to something you don't really care about just because you think you should, the energy is contracted. But if you're supporting a cause that lights you up, that matters deeply to you, that you believe in with your whole heart, the energy is expanded. The universe responds to the expansion, not the obligation. So give your maser to what genuinely moves you. To the children's hospital that saved your daughter's life. To the environmental organization protecting forests you love. To the teacher who changed your life. To the friend who's going through a hard time. Let your heart guide the direction of your giving. And let the 10% be the discipline that ensures it actually happens. I want to address something that stops many people from starting this practice. The feeling that you should wait until you're more financially stable. When I get that raise, then I'll start. When I pay off this debt, then I'll begin. When I'm making 6 figures, then 10% won't feel like so much. This is a trap. This is your scarcity programming, creating conditions that ensure you never start. Because here's the truth. If you can't give 10% of $1,000, you won't give 10% of $10,000. If you can't circulate energy at your current level, you won't circulate it at the next level. The pattern follows you. The consciousness you operate from now is the consciousness you'll operate from later, unless you deliberately change it. And you change it by practicing at the level where you are now, not at some imaginary future level. Start with your current income, whatever it is, even if it's tiny, even if it's irregular, even if you're receiving government assistance, 10% of whatever comes to you. This establishes the pattern, creates the neural pathway, installs the program of circulation instead of accumulation. There's a beautiful teaching from the Zohar, the foundational text of Kabbalah, about Maser. It says that when you give your 10th, you create a protection around the remaining 90%. Your wealth becomes guarded by divine providence. Things that would normally go wrong, unexpected expenses, accidents, losses, somehow don't happen or happen less severely. This isn't superstition. Think about it energetically. When you're in alignment with universal law, when you're flowing with the Shepa instead of against it, you're in a state of coherence, and coherence creates a field of protection around you. Your immune system is stronger, your intuition is sharper, your timing is better. You make decisions from clarity instead of fear. You avoid problems that people operating from scarcity consciousness walk right into. The 90% you keep is actually safer, more secure, more likely to grow than the 100% you would have had if you tried to keep it all. Let me share one more story that illustrates the power of Maser. Michael was a real estate investor who had been moderately successful for years. He made good money, but he also had huge overhead, constant stress, and a nagging feeling that he was always one deal away from disaster. He heard about Maser from a mentor and decided to try it, but he did it in a way that revealed something important. He started giving 10% of his net profit, not his gross income. He was still calculating, still trying to control, still operating from fear, and his results were moderate. Things got slightly better, but not dramatically. Then his mentor challenged him. You're still negotiating with the universe. You're still trying to give less than what's asked. Try giving 10% of the gross revenue, before expenses, before anything else. Michael's accountant nearly had a heart attack, but Michael did it anyway, and within 6 months, his business had tripled. Not because he worked harder, he actually worked less. Not because the market changed, it was the same market, but because he had finally fully aligned with the principle of circulation. He had stopped negotiating and started trusting, and in that trust, channels opened that had been closed for years. As you prepare for sleep tonight, I want you to make a decision. Not tomorrow, not next week, not when things get better. Right now. What is 10% of your current income? Calculate it. Write it down tomorrow if you need to, and commit to giving that amount from your next paycheck, your next payment, your next influx of money from any source. It doesn't matter if it seems too small to make a difference or too large to afford. What matters is the commitment, the decision, the declaration you're making to yourself and to the universe. I am a channel of abundance. I participate in the sacred proportion. I align myself with the flow of Shepa. I give my 10th as an act of trust, as an expression of my true nature, as a key that unlocks the windows of heaven. And as you drift into sleep, imagine that you've just planted a seed. You've placed it in fertile soil. You've watered it with your intention. Now you're allowing it to germinate in the darkness, trusting that what you've planted will grow, will break through the surface, will become something greater than what you put in the ground. This is not faith without reason. This is alignment with the laws that govern prosperity. This is Maser. This is your sacred 10th, and it's about to change everything. Chapter 7. Transforming receiving into sacred art. There's a dimension of Tzedakah that most people never discover, even those who practice giving regularly. It's the other half of the equation, the completion of the circuit, the part that determines whether energy actually flows or just leaks out without creating transformation. I'm talking about receiving. Most spiritual teachings focus exclusively on giving, the generosity, the selflessness, the opening of the heart. And these are beautiful, essential qualities. But what almost no one teaches is this: if you cannot receive with the same consciousness that you give, you haven't completed the circuit. You've created a one-way valve that eventually exhausts you, depletes you, and ironically blocks the very abundance you're trying to circulate. True mastery of Tzedakah requires you to become as skilled at receiving as you are at giving. And for most people, this is actually the harder practice. because receiving requires you to face your deepest beliefs about worthiness, about deserving, about your place in the universe. Receiving asks you to believe that you are worthy of the same generosity you extend to others. And that belief is where most people stumble. Think about the last time someone offered you a genuine gift, a sincere compliment, or help when you needed it. What was your immediate response? If you're like most people, you probably deflected. Oh, you didn't have to do that. It's really not a big deal. I can handle it myself. Or worse, you immediately started calculating how you could repay them, how you could make sure you didn't owe them anything, how you could maintain the balance sheet of exchange. This deflection, this discomfort with receiving, is not humility. It's actually a form of arrogance. Because when you refuse to receive, you're denying the other person the joy and the spiritual benefit of giving. You're blocking their tzedakah practice. You're saying, in effect, I don't need what you're offering because I'm self-sufficient. And self-sufficiency is the ultimate illusion. It's the ego's attempt to prove that you don't need the universe, that you don't need connection, that you're somehow separate from the web of giving and receiving that sustains all life. When you refuse to receive, you're actually refusing to participate fully in the flow of Shepa. Let me introduce you to a woman named Sophia, who embodied this pattern perfectly. Sophia was extraordinarily generous. She volunteered at homeless shelters, donated regularly to charity, helped friends whenever they needed anything, gave her time and energy freely to anyone who asked. People called her a saint, but Sophia's life was characterized by struggle. She worked long hours for modest pay. She had health issues that she ignored because she couldn't afford treatment. Her car was barely running. Her apartment was falling apart. And whenever anyone offered to help her, really help her, not just with sympathy but with actual resources, she refused. "I'm fine," she would say. "Save it for someone who really needs it." Sophia could give, but she absolutely could not receive. And this created a devastating imbalance in her energy field. She was constantly pouring out without allowing anything to pour back in. She was a channel with only an exit, no entrance. And eventually, like any system operating in one direction without replenishment, she was heading toward complete depletion. The turning point came when Sophia collapsed at work from exhaustion and malnutrition. She ended up in the hospital, and her community rallied around her. They brought food, they offered money, they wanted to help with her rent and medical bills. And Sophia's instinct was to refuse all of it. But lying in that hospital bed, something shifted in her awareness. A nurse, an older woman with kind eyes, sat down next to her and said something Sophia never forgot. "Honey, when you refuse to let people help you, you're robbing them of their blessing. Giving is how we connect to God, and you're standing in the way of their connection." In that moment, Sophia realized that her inability to receive wasn't virtue. It was fear. She was afraid that if she received, she would be indebted. She was afraid that she wasn't worthy of receiving. She was afraid that accepting help meant admitting she wasn't strong enough to handle life alone. And all these fears were keeping her trapped in a cycle of depletion disguised as generosity. Sophia made a decision in that hospital bed. She was going to practice receiving with the same intentionality that she practiced giving. When her friends brought food, she accepted it with genuine gratitude instead of deflecting. When someone offered to pay a bill, she said yes instead of no. When help was extended, she opened her hands instead of waving them away. And it was excruciating at first. Every fiber of her conditioning screamed against it. She felt vulnerable, exposed, like she was admitting some fundamental weakness. But she kept practicing. She kept saying yes when her instinct was to say no. She kept allowing herself to be on the receiving end of generosity. And something extraordinary began to happen. As she opened herself to receiving, her entire energy field shifted. The channels that had been one way became two-way. And not only did resources begin flowing to her more easily, but her health improved, her energy returned, and opportunities she had never noticed before began appearing in her awareness. Within 6 months, she had a new job with better pay. Her medical issues were resolving, and she felt more alive than she had in years. The practice of receiving had completed the circuit that her practice of giving had started. Here's the spiritual physics behind why receiving is so essential. The universe operates on polarity, positive and negative, masculine and feminine, yang and yin, giving and receiving. These aren't opposites. They're complementary forces that create wholeness through their dynamic interaction. Electricity requires both positive and negative charges to flow. Breathing requires both inhale and exhale. Your heart requires both contraction and expansion. And the flow of abundance requires both giving and receiving. When you only give, you create an imbalance in the polarity. You're trying to exhale without inhaling. And while you might be able to do it for a short time, eventually you'll pass out from lack of oxygen. Receiving is how you inhale the abundance that allows you to exhale through giving. It's not optional. It's essential to the sustainability of the entire system. The ancient Kabbalists taught something profound about this. They said that in the highest spiritual realms, there is no separation between giving and receiving. The Sephirot both give and receive simultaneously. They receive from the Sephirot above them and give to the Sephirot below them. This is how the divine flow moves from infinite source to finite manifestation. Each level is both a giver and a receiver. And human beings, positioned between spiritual and material realms, are designed to function the same way. We receive from the spiritual dimension inspiration, creativity, intuition, blessings, and we give to the material dimension through our work, our service, our Tzedakah practice. But we also receive from the material dimension money, resources, help, support, and we give back to the spiritual dimension through gratitude, prayer, elevated consciousness. We're meant to be conduits in both directions, channels that allow energy to flow up and down, in and out, continuously. When you block receiving, you're essentially telling the universe, I don't trust you to provide for me. I'll take care of myself. And the universe, which only responds to your actual energetic state, says, okay, you're on your own then. It stops sending resources your way because you've closed the entrance to the channel. You've posted a no deliveries sign on your door. And then you wonder why, despite all your giving, despite all your generosity, you're still struggling. It's because you've only opened half the circuit. Imagine trying to charge your phone by only plugging one end of the cable into the wall. The other end, the receiving end, is dangling in the air. No connection is made. No energy flows. No charging happens. This is what your life looks like when you can give, but cannot receive. You're plugged into the source on the giving end, but disconnected on the receiving end. And without both connections, the circuit doesn't complete. Now let's talk about the practice of conscious receiving, because it's a skill that must be developed. The first principle is acknowledgement. When someone gives to you, when help arrives, when abundance shows up, acknowledge it fully. Don't minimize it. Don't deflect it. Don't immediately start calculating repayment. Simply receive it with presence and awareness. Look the person in the eye and say, thank you. I receive this with gratitude. Feel the weight of what's being offered. Let it land in your body. Allow yourself to truly take it in. This simple act of full acknowledgement creates an energetic reception that allows the gift to complete its journey from giver to receiver. Without acknowledgement, the gift bounces off you like a ball thrown at a wall. With acknowledgement, it penetrates, it nourishes, it fulfills its purpose. The second principle is worthiness. You must practice knowing that you are worthy of receiving, not because of what you've done or achieved or accomplished, not because you've earned it or deserve it or worked hard enough, but simply because you exist, because you are an expression of the divine source that creates and sustains all abundance. The universe doesn't calculate worthiness based on your resume. It pours forth shefa indiscriminately, like the sun shining on everyone, regardless of merit. Your worthiness is inherent, not earned, and the practice of receiving is how you align with this truth. Every time you receive something, a gift, a compliment, help, money, love, you have an opportunity to affirm your worthiness. You can either deflect it, which reinforces unworthiness, or you can receive it fully, which reinforces your inherent value as a being who deserves to be blessed. The third principle is circulation. When you receive, you're not just taking. You're participating in the larger flow. The abundance that comes to you came from somewhere. It flowed through someone else to reach you, and it will flow through you to reach someone else. You're not the end point. You're a way station. This understanding removes the guilt or obligation that often accompanies receiving. You're not taking something from someone else's limited supply. You're allowing the infinite supply to move through another channel, the person giving to you, to reach you, so that it can then move through you, when you give to others, to continue its journey. Receiving is just the inhale before the exhale. It's the filling before the pouring. When you understand that receiving is part of circulation, not accumulation, it becomes easier to allow. There's a practice I recommend for people who struggle with receiving. For the next 30 days, say yes to every offer of help, every gift, every kindness extended to you. Not in a passive, entitled way, but in a conscious, grateful way. When someone offers to buy you coffee, say yes. When a friend offers to help you move, say yes. When someone compliments you, say thank you instead of deflecting. When unexpected money shows up, receive it with gratitude instead of suspicion. This practice will bring up enormous resistance. Your scarcity programming, your unworthiness beliefs, your fear of obligation, all of it will surface. Good. That's the point. You want to see these patterns clearly so you can consciously choose to override them. Each time you say yes when your instinct is to say no, you're rewiring your receiving channels. You're teaching your nervous system that it's safe to receive, that you're worthy of receiving, that receiving doesn't make you weak or obligated or less independent. It makes you part of the flow. I want to tell you about Marcus, a man who practiced this 30-day receiving challenge with remarkable results. Marcus was a successful entrepreneur who had built his business from nothing. He was proud of his self-sufficiency, his independence, his ability to handle everything himself. He gave generously to charity and helped friends when they needed it, but he never asked for help and rarely accepted it when offered. His wife finally confronted him. You give and give and give, but you won't let anyone give to you. It's like you don't think you need anyone. Marcus started the receiving practice reluctantly. The first week was painful. His friend offered to help him with a project, and Marcus said yes instead of his usual, "I've got it." A colleague offered advice, and Marcus accepted it instead of defending his approach. His wife offered to take care of something he usually handled, and he let her. Every acceptance felt like admitting defeat. But by week 3, something was shifting. He noticed that people wanted to help him, wanted to give to him, and he had been blocking them for years. By letting them in, by receiving their offers, he was actually deepening his relationships. He was allowing genuine reciprocity instead of one-directional generosity. By the end of the 30 days, Marcus had a realization that changed everything. He said, "I thought independence was strength, but real strength is interdependence. It's knowing that we're all connected, that we all give and we all receive, that no one makes it alone." When I was only giving, I was actually separating myself, putting myself above others. When I started receiving, I joined the human family. And here's what happened in Marcus's business during those 30 days. 3 opportunities came to him that he hadn't been looking for, partnerships he never would have considered, ideas that came from conversations he was finally open enough to have. His revenue increased by 40% in that month, not because he worked harder, but because he had finally opened the receiving channels that had been closed for decades. The abundance that had been trying to reach him finally had a way in. Here's what I need you to understand. Receiving is not passive. It's not lazy. It's not weak. Receiving is an active practice of opening, of trusting, of allowing the universe to support you the way you support others. When you receive consciously, you're demonstrating faith in the abundance of the universe. You're saying, "I trust that there is enough. I trust that I am worthy. I trust that giving and receiving are 2 sides of the same sacred practice." And this trust creates a magnetic field around you that draws even more abundance toward you. Because the universe doesn't reward self-sufficiency, it rewards participation in the flow. It doesn't bless isolation, it blesses connection. And you cannot be connected if you're only willing to give, never to receive. As you settle into sleep tonight, I want you to feel into your receiving channels. Imagine there are channels of light coming down from above you, channels through which blessings, resources, abundance want to flow to you. But at the entrance to these channels, you've placed filters, screens, barriers. These barriers are your beliefs. I don't deserve this. I should be able to handle it myself. I don't want to owe anyone. Someone else needs it more. See these barriers clearly. And now, imagine that you have the power to remove them. One by one, you pull away each screen, each filter, each barrier. As you remove them, golden light begins pouring down through the channels, filling you, nourishing you, blessing you. And you realize this light has always been there, always been trying to reach you. You were just blocking it. Now the channels are open. Now the flow is complete. You are giving and you are receiving. You are exhaling and you are inhaling. You are participating fully in the sacred circulation of abundance. And as you drift into sleep, feel yourself held by this flow, supported by this love, worthy of this blessing. You are not alone. You never were. You are part of an infinite web of giving and receiving that has sustained life since the beginning of time. And now, finally, you're allowing yourself to receive your portion of the infinite abundance that has always been yours. Chapter 8. Cases of Transformation. Testimonies of Tzedakah's Power. Sometimes the most powerful teaching comes not from principles or theories, but from real stories of real people whose lives were fundamentally altered by putting those principles into practice. In this chapter, I want to share with you several profound transformations that occurred when individuals committed fully to the practice of Tzedakah. These aren't fairy tales or exaggerations. These are documented accounts of people who stepped into the flow of giving and receiving, who aligned themselves with the cosmic law of circulation, and who experienced results that defy conventional logic. As you listen to these stories, pay attention not just to what happened externally, but to the internal shifts that preceded and accompanied the external transformations. Because the real miracle isn't the money or the opportunities that appeared. It's the metamorphosis of consciousness that made those manifestations inevitable. The first story is about a man named Daniel who was a physician in a major city hospital. Daniel had everything that society defines as success: a prestigious position, a six-figure income, a beautiful home, respect from his peers. But he was miserable. He worked brutal hours, felt disconnected from his patients, and was drowning in medical school debt that seemed like it would take forever to pay off. His relationship with money was characterized by constant anxiety despite earning well. He calculated every expense, worried about the future, and felt trapped on a treadmill of earning and spending that left him feeling empty. One day, an elderly patient was being discharged and had no way to pay for the medications she needed. Daniel saw the desperation in her eyes and made a spontaneous decision. He went to the pharmacy himself and paid for her prescriptions, $400 that he could technically afford, but that his scarcity programming immediately flagged as irresponsible. As he handed the medications to the woman and saw her tears of gratitude, something cracked open in his chest. He felt more alive in that moment than he had felt in years. That night, Daniel couldn't stop thinking about the feeling that simple act of giving had created. It was as if a door had opened to a part of himself he'd forgotten existed. He started researching the practice of Tzedakah and discovered the principle of Maser. Despite every rational objection his mind produced, he made a commitment. He would give 10% of his income, starting immediately. He calculated his monthly salary and set up automatic transfers. 10% would go to a fund he created to help patients who couldn't afford medications and treatments. His accountant told him he was making a mistake. His colleagues thought he was having some kind of crisis. But Daniel felt more certain of this decision than he'd felt about anything in years. The first month was terrifying. He kept checking his bank balance, expecting catastrophe. But nothing bad happened. In fact, something strange did happen. He received an unexpected tax refund he'd forgotten about, almost exactly equal to what he'd given away. By the third month, Daniel noticed he was thinking about money differently. The constant background anxiety had diminished. He wasn't calculating and worrying all the time. He felt lighter, freer, more present with his patients. And then the external shifts began. A private practice group approached him with a partnership offer he hadn't sought. Better hours, more autonomy, and surprisingly, better compensation. Within 6 months of starting his Tzedakah practice, Daniel's income had increased by 40%. His debt repayment had accelerated dramatically, and he was experiencing a joy in his work that he thought he'd lost forever. But what Daniel emphasized when he shared his story was that the money was almost secondary. The real transformation was in his relationship with abundance itself. He said, "I used to feel like I was constantly fighting to get enough and hold on to what I had. Now I feel like I'm part of a flow that's so much bigger than me. The money comes and goes, but I'm always taken care of. I'm always exactly where I need to be. That security is worth more than any amount in a bank account." The second story is about a woman named Jennifer who was in a completely different situation. Jennifer was a single mother who had escaped an abusive marriage with her 2 young children. She was working as a waitress, living in a tiny apartment, and struggling to provide even basic necessities. Some weeks, she had to choose between buying her daughter's asthma medication or keeping the electricity on. The idea of giving 10% of her meager income seemed not just impossible, but insulting. She was the one who needed help, not someone who could afford to help others. But Jennifer's grandmother had practiced Tzedakah her entire life, and as she lay dying, she made Jennifer promise to try it. "Even when you have nothing," her grandmother whispered, "especially when you have nothing, you give. That's when it matters most." Jennifer made the promise not believing it would work, but determined to honor her grandmother's dying wish. Jennifer started with $1 a day. That was all she felt she could possibly spare. Every morning, she would put $1 in an envelope, and once a week, she would take that $7 and give it to someone who needed it. Sometimes the homeless man who sat outside her work, sometimes the food bank, sometimes another struggling parent at her daughter's school. It felt simultaneously meaningful and futile. $7 a week wasn't going to change her life, but she kept her promise. After a month, something unexpected happened. A customer at the restaurant where she worked, a regular who had seen Jennifer's consistent kindness and hard work, offered her a job as a personal assistant. The pay was triple what she made waitressing, and the hours allowed her to be home when her kids got out of school. Jennifer was stunned. She had never mentioned needing a better job. The opportunity had simply appeared. But the transformation didn't stop there. As Jennifer's income increased, she increased her tzedakah proportionally. She moved from $7 a week to 10% of her new salary. And every time her income grew, her giving grew with it. Within a year, she had moved to a better apartment. Within 2 years, she had started a small savings account. Within 3 years, she was able to put her kids in a better school. But Jennifer will tell you that the most important change wasn't material. It was psychological and spiritual. She said, "When I started giving, even those tiny amounts, I stopped seeing myself as a victim. I stopped waiting for someone to rescue me. I realized I had power, the power to help others, the power to participate in something bigger than my own survival. And somehow, stepping into that power changed everything. It's like the universe was waiting for me to remember who I really was. And the moment I did, all these doors opened." The third story involves a couple, Robert and Linda, who had been married for 15 years and were on the brink of divorce. Their relationship had deteriorated into constant fighting about money. Robert worked in sales with irregular commission-based income. Linda was a teacher with a steady but modest salary. They had different approaches to finances. Robert wanted to save aggressively for an uncertain future, while Linda wanted to enjoy life in the present. Neither was wrong, but they couldn't find common ground. The tension was destroying their marriage. In a last attempt to find connection, they attended a workshop on conscious relationships where the facilitator introduced the concept of tzedakah as a shared spiritual practice that couples could use to align their energies and values. Robert was skeptical, but Linda was intrigued. They decided to try an experiment. They would jointly decide on a cause they both cared about. They chose an organization that provided educational resources to underprivileged children, and they would give 10% of their combined income to this cause every month. The decision had to be mutual. The amount had to be agreed upon, and they would do it together as a practice of unity. The first month was rocky. They argued about whether they could afford it, but they honored their commitment, and something fascinating happened. The act of giving together, of making decisions together about their shared tzedakah practice, created a new kind of conversation between them. Instead of fighting about what to keep and protect, they were discussing what to give and to whom. Instead of operating from fear and scarcity, they were practicing trust and abundance together. Within 3 months, the quality of their relationship had transformed. They were talking more, laughing more, feeling like partners instead of adversaries, and mysteriously, their financial situation improved. Robert's sales increased. Linda received an unexpected grant for a project at her school. They weren't making exponentially more money, but somehow they had more than enough. The scarcity that had characterized their finances evaporated. Robert later reflected that Tzedakah practice didn't just change our bank account. It changed our entire energetic field as a couple. We stopped being two individuals trying to protect separate interests and became a team participating in something sacred. And when we aligned around giving, everything else aligned too. They're still married today, and they credit their Tzedakah practice as the foundation that saved and transformed their relationship. The fourth story is about a young man named Carlos, who was 23 years old and had just graduated from college with a degree in computer science and $40,000 in student debt. He had a decent entry-level job, but the debt felt crushing. He was living in his parents' basement, eating ramen noodles and pouring every spare dollar into loan payments. One of his professors, whom Carlos respected deeply, mentioned that he had practiced Maser his entire adult life, even as a struggling graduate student. Carlos was baffled. How could you afford to give away 10% when you had loans and barely enough to live on? The professor smiled and said, I couldn't afford not to. That 10% was my connection to abundance. It was my declaration that I trusted the universe to provide, and it always did. Carlos decided to try it, but with a twist. He knew he couldn't commit to 10% of his gross income. The math was too terrifying with his loan payments. So he started with 1%. Just 1% of his paycheck would go to Tzedakah. It was a small enough amount that he could manage it, but significant enough that it felt like a real practice, a real commitment. He chose to support a scholarship fund for students from low-income families, kids who were facing the same debt burden he was struggling with. Every month, he gave his 1% and increased his loan payments as aggressively as he could. After 6 months of this practice, something in Carlos shifted. He realized that 1% felt easy now, comfortable even, so he increased to 2%, then 3%, then 5%. Each increase felt like a stretch, but each time he stretched, something in his external reality shifted to accommodate it. By the time Carlos reached 10%, which took him about 18 months, his circumstances had completely transformed. He'd been promoted twice, his salary had nearly doubled, and he'd received a signing bonus from a new job that eliminated a significant chunk of his debt. He was out of his parents' basement and into his own apartment. He had savings for the first time in his life. But what Carlos marveled at wasn't just the practical improvements. It was the psychological transformation. He said, I used to feel like my debt was a prison sentence. I was serving time, counting down the years until I could be free. But when I started giving, even that tiny 1%, I stopped feeling like a prisoner. I felt like a participant in life. I had power. I could help others even while I was struggling. And that shift from victim to agent changed everything about how I showed up in the world. Better opportunities didn't just appear. I was finally able to see and seize them because I wasn't operating from desperation anymore. The fifth and final story I want to share is about a woman named Miriam who was 67 years old and living on a fixed retirement income. Miriam had always been cautious with money, saving diligently her entire life. She had a comfortable retirement fund, but she was terrified of running out. She calculated her expenses meticulously, denied herself simple pleasures to preserve her savings, and lived in a constant state of low-grade anxiety about the future. One day, her granddaughter, who had been studying Jewish mysticism, told her about Tzedakah, and specifically about a teaching that said, "Giving actually protects your wealth." Miriam was intrigued, but doubtful. At her age, with no income beyond her fixed pension, giving seemed like the fastest way to deplete her resources. But Miriam decided to try an experiment. She would give $18 a week. Chai, the Hebrew word for life, which corresponds to the number 18 and is considered an auspicious amount for giving. She chose causes that had mattered to her throughout her life: libraries, animal shelters, medical research. Every week without fail, she gave her $18, and she paid attention to what happened. What happened was extraordinary. First, Miriam noticed that the anxiety she'd carried for decades began to lift. She wasn't constantly checking her account balance, wasn't lying awake at night, calculating whether she'd have enough. The act of giving regularly created a sense of trust she hadn't experienced before. Second, unexpected money began appearing. Her investment portfolio, which had been stagnant for years, started performing well. She received an unexpected inheritance from a distant relative she barely knew. Her expenses mysteriously decreased. Things that usually broke didn't break. Medical costs were lower than expected. She needed fewer repairs on her home. But the most profound change was in Miriam's quality of life. She started saying yes to things she'd denied herself for years. She traveled to visit old friends. She bought books without guilt. She treated her grandchildren to experiences she'd previously called extravagant. And through it all, her savings not only didn't decrease, they grew. Miriam lived another 18 years, dying peacefully at 85, and when her will was read, her family was shocked to discover she'd left an estate twice the size of what she'd had when she started her Tzedakah practice. The lawyer handling her estate found a journal Miriam had kept, documenting every act of Tzedakah and every unexpected blessing. The final entry, written a week before she died, said simply, "I spent the first 67 years of my life afraid of not having enough. I spent the last 18 years giving away what I was afraid to lose, and discovering that abundance was never about the amount. It was about the flow. I wish I'd learned this sooner, but I'm grateful I learned it at all." These 5 stories, Daniel, Jennifer, Robert and Linda, Carlos and Miriam, span different ages, different circumstances, different starting points, but they all illustrate the same fundamental truth. Tzedakah works, not because it manipulates the universe into giving you what you want, but because it transforms who you are. It shifts your consciousness from scarcity to abundance, from fear to trust, from separation to connection. And when your consciousness shifts, your reality must shift to match it. This isn't wishful thinking or positive affirmations. This is the demonstrated, repeatable, verifiable result of aligning yourself with the laws that govern prosperity. Every person who commits fully to this practice experiences transformation. The details differ, but the essence is always the same. You become a different person, and that different person lives in a different reality. As you prepare for sleep tonight, I want you to imagine yourself into one of these stories. Which one resonates most deeply with you? Are you Daniel, successful on paper but empty inside? Are you Jennifer, struggling but willing to give anyway? Are you Robert and Linda, fighting over resources instead of flowing together? Are you Carlos, burdened by debt but ready to start small? Are you Miriam, cautious and afraid but open to a late-life transformation? See yourself in their situation. And now, see yourself making the same choice they made. The choice to trust, to give, to step into the flow regardless of the circumstances. Feel what it would be like to experience the same shifts they experienced. The relief, the opening, the alignment, the miraculous reorganization of reality that happens when you change your relationship with abundance. These stories aren't exceptions. They're examples. They're showing you what's possible when you practice Tzedakah with commitment and consciousness. And what was possible for them is possible for you. The same laws apply. The same flow is available. The same transformation awaits. All that's required is your decision to step in. Chapter 9. Integrating Tzedakah into your state of being. There comes a moment in every transformational practice when it stops being something you do and becomes something you are. This is the moment when the practice integrates so deeply into your consciousness that it's no longer an effort, no longer a discipline you must force yourself to maintain. It becomes your natural expression, your automatic response, your default way of being in the world. With Tzedakah, this integration represents the ultimate transformation, the shift from practicing generosity to embodying abundance itself. You are no longer someone who gives despite scarcity. You are someone who gives because abundance is your nature. You're not trying to become a channel of prosperity. You've recognized that you already are one. You've always been one. And giving is simply what channels do. This chapter is about that integration, about the journey from external practice to internal identity, from doing to being. The integration process happens in stages, and understanding these stages helps you navigate the journey with awareness and patience. In the first stage, Tzedakah is uncomfortable. Every act of giving triggers resistance, fear, the voice that says, "But what about me?" This is normal. This is your old programming, fighting for survival. In this stage, the practice requires willpower, commitment, sometimes even forcing yourself to follow through, despite the discomfort. You're overriding decades of conditioning with conscious choice. It feels unnatural, because it is unnatural to the version of you that's been operating from scarcity. But you do it anyway, not because it feels good, but because you've decided to trust the principle more than you trust your fear. This stage can last weeks or months, depending on how deeply your scarcity programming runs. The key is consistency. You keep giving, keep practicing, keep choosing circulation over accumulation, even when everything in you wants to hold on. The second stage is habituation. Tzedakah becomes easier, more automatic, less triggering. You've created neural pathways through repetition. Your brain has started to accept the new pattern. You no longer agonize over every act of giving. You just do it. It's become a habit, like brushing your teeth or making your morning coffee. In this stage, the resistance has diminished significantly, but the practice still feels somewhat separate from who you are. You're someone who practices Tzedakah, but it's still a practice, still something you're doing, rather than something you're being. This stage is crucial because it's where most people get comfortable and stop evolving. They think, great, I've integrated the practice. I give my 10% regularly. Mission accomplished. But there's a deeper level available, a more profound integration possible. And to reach it, you must continue past the comfort of habit into the mystery of transformation. The third stage is internalization. This is where tzedakah stops being something you do and starts becoming part of your identity. You're not just someone who gives, you're someone who is generous by nature. The practice has rewired your subconscious. Your default response to abundance is now to circulate it rather than hoard it. You find yourself giving in ways you never planned, helping people you hadn't intended to help, being generous in moments where you're not consciously thinking about tzedakah at all. It's become who you are. In this stage, you start to notice that the universe responds to you differently. Opportunities flow more easily. Resources appear more readily. People are drawn to help you. It's as if you've been accepted into a different level of the cosmic economy, one that operates on trust and flow, rather than fear and accumulation. This is not imagination. This is the practical result of energetic alignment. You've become a clear channel, and Shepa flows through you with increasing power and grace. The fourth and deepest stage is embodiment. At this level, you don't think about tzedakah at all in the conventional sense. You don't separate giving from living. You're simply a being through whom abundance naturally flows. You receive and you give with the same ease, the same naturalness, the same lack of attachment. Money comes in, and a portion flows out, and you witness both movements with equanimity and trust. You've transcended the entire paradigm of mine and yours, having and lacking. You recognize that everything is the universe's resources temporarily in your stewardship, and you manage those resources with wisdom and generosity. In this stage, miracles become normal. Synchronicities are constant. You're living in a state of flow, where what you need appears exactly when you need it, where you're guided to give exactly what's needed, exactly when it's needed, where the intelligence of the universe moves through you with minimal interference from ego or fear. Let me tell you about a woman named Sarah, who moved through all 4 stages over the course of 3 years. Sarah started her tzedakah practice in the first stage, deeply uncomfortable, fighting every impulse to hold on, forcing herself to give her 10%, even when it terrified her. She was a freelance graphic designer with irregular income, and giving away 10% of every payment felt like financial suicide. But she committed. For the first 6 months, every act of giving was accompanied by anxiety, regret, second-guessing. She'd give her maser and then immediately check her bank balance, calculating how long she could survive if no new clients appeared. This was stage 1. The practice was happening, but it was hard, effortful, uncomfortable. But Sarah didn't quit. She kept giving, kept trusting, kept choosing the practice over the fear. Around month 7, Sarah noticed the resistance was diminishing. She still felt a little flutter of anxiety when she gave, but it was manageable, almost background noise. She'd set up automatic transfers so that 10% of every deposit went immediately to her tzedakah fund, and she stopped agonizing over each transaction. It became routine. She was in stage 2, habituation. The practice was established, the neural pathways were formed, but it was still just that. A practice, something she did, a discipline she maintained. She stayed in this stage for about a year, giving consistently, experiencing moderate improvements in her business, but not yet feeling the profound shifts she'd heard about. She wondered if maybe the dramatic transformations only happened to other people. But she kept going, trusting the process even when it felt mundane. Then about 18 months into her practice, something shifted. Sarah was at a coffee shop when she overheard a young artist talking about how she couldn't afford software she needed for a project. Without thinking, without calculating, Sarah walked over and said, "I'll buy it for you." It was a $400 purchase, completely unplanned, and she made the decision in about 3 seconds. It wasn't until later that she realized something profound had happened. She'd given spontaneously, generously, without any of the old mental gymnastics. The resistance was gone. The fear was gone. She'd just seen a need and met it, naturally, like breathing. This was the beginning of stage 3, internalization. Over the next several months, Sarah noticed this happening more and more. She was tipping more generously, helping people without being asked, seeing opportunities to give and taking them immediately. And as her internal relationship with abundance shifted, her external reality began transforming dramatically. New clients started appearing, bigger projects, better rates. She raised her prices and people paid them without negotiation. She created a course that generated passive income. Within 6 months of entering stage 3, Sarah's income had tripled. But the money wasn't what fascinated her most. It was the feeling of being in flow. She described it as living downstream instead of upstream. Everything felt easier, more graceful, more synchronistic. And she realized that the Tzedakah practice had fundamentally rewired her consciousness. She wasn't practicing abundance anymore. She was being abundant. This continued for another year, with Sarah's business growing, her generosity expanding, her life feeling increasingly magical. And then, about 3 years into her Tzedakah journey, she crossed into stage 4, embodiment. Sarah described stage 4 as dissolving into the flow. She stopped tracking her giving. She stopped calculating percentages. She simply gave when she felt called to give. And it was always more than enough, always more than 10%, often significantly more. And she received in the same way, without grasping, without anxiety, with simple trust that what she needed would arrive. Her business became almost effortless. Clients found her. Projects materialized. Money appeared from unexpected sources. But what really characterized this stage was the quality of her consciousness. She lived in a constant state of gratitude and generosity that wasn't dependent on circumstances. She was equally generous when money was flowing in and when it wasn't, equally trusting in abundance during lean months and fat months. She'd transcended the entire emotional roller coaster of financial anxiety. She was simply a clear, open channel, and Shepa flowed through her powerfully and continuously. The journey from stage 1 to stage 4 isn't about willpower or perfection. It's about consistent practice combined with conscious awareness of your internal state. You don't force yourself from one stage to the next. You allow the natural progression to unfold through daily commitment to the practice. But there are specific things you can do to facilitate this integration, to accelerate your movement from external practice to internal identity. The first is mindfulness during giving. Don't just write the check or make the transfer mechanically. Pause, feel into the act. Notice what's happening in your body, your emotions, your energy. Are you contracting or expanding? Are you afraid or trusting? Are you giving from obligation or from overflow? This awareness allows you to see your patterns clearly and to consciously choose a higher response. The second practice is gratitude for opportunities to give. Instead of viewing tzedakah as an obligation or even a spiritual practice, start seeing it as a privilege. You get to participate in the flow of abundance. You get to be a channel of blessing. You get to help, to serve, to contribute. This reframe transforms the entire energy of giving. When you're grateful for the opportunity to give, you're affirming your abundance rather than depleting it. You're saying, I have so much that I can share it freely, and that affirmation creates more to share. Every act of giving becomes a celebration of your connection to infinite supply. This shift from obligation to privilege is one of the most powerful accelerators of integration. The third practice is visualization of yourself as a channel. Spend time each day, perhaps in meditation or in those liminal moments before sleep, imagining yourself as a conduit through which universal abundance flows. See energy coming down from above, through the crown of your head, through your heart, out through your hands. See it flowing continuously, effortlessly, powerfully. Don't visualize yourself as a container trying to fill up. Visualize yourself as a river, always moving, always fresh, always abundant, because you're connected to an infinite source. This visualization reprograms your subconscious identity. You're not practicing being a channel. You're recognizing that you already are one. And this recognition at the deepest level of your mind manifests as your lived reality. The fourth practice is releasing attachment to outcomes. One of the biggest obstacles to integration is the subtle expectation that your giving should produce specific results. You give, and then you watch for what comes back, measuring, calculating, wondering if it's working. This watching is actually a form of doubt, a lack of trust, and it creates energetic interference. True integration happens when you give with no attachment to return, when you give purely because giving is your nature, when you trust so completely in the abundance of the universe that you don't need to monitor the exchange. This doesn't mean you're passive or unaware of your finances. It means you're not anxiously measuring reciprocity. You give, you receive, and you trust that the universe is managing the flow with intelligence far beyond your conscious understanding. The fifth and perhaps most important practice is self-compassion during the journey. Integration doesn't happen overnight. You will have days when you fall back into scarcity thinking. You will have moments when giving feels hard again. You will experience setbacks, doubts, fears. This is normal. This is human. The practice isn't about being perfect. It's about being persistent. When you notice yourself contracting, when you catch yourself in old patterns, don't judge yourself harshly. Simply notice. Bring awareness to the pattern and make a different choice. Each time you choose differently, you strengthen the new neural pathway. Each time you override scarcity with generosity, you move closer to integration. Be patient with yourself. Be kind to yourself. Transformation is a process, not an event. I want you to understand something crucial. The goal isn't to transcend your humanity, or to become some perfectly enlightened being who never experiences fear or doubt. The goal is to develop a practice so strong, an identity so rooted in abundance, that even when fear or doubt arise, they don't control you. You feel the fear and you give anyway. You notice the doubt and you trust anyway. You're not trying to eliminate your human emotions. You're learning to act from a deeper truth than those emotions. You're learning to live from your highest self, your abundant self, your divine self. Even when your ego is screaming about scarcity and danger, this is the integration, not the absence of the old programming, but the presence of a stronger, truer identity that doesn't need the old programming to disappear in order to function from abundance. As you move through these stages, you'll notice that your relationship with money becomes almost irrelevant to your sense of security. This sounds paradoxical, but it's profoundly true. When you're identified with being a channel of abundance, when giving and receiving are both natural expressions of who you are, you stop needing specific amounts of money to feel safe. You feel safe because you're connected to the source. You feel abundant because abundance is your nature, not your possession. Your bank balance becomes simply information, not validation. It tells you what resources are currently flowing through your channel, but it doesn't tell you who you are or what you're worth. This detachment is liberating beyond measure. It frees you from the tyranny of enough, from the endless pursuit of more, from the constant anxiety of what if I lose it all? Because you can't lose what you are. You can only forget it temporarily. As you settle into sleep tonight, I want you to sense which stage of integration you're currently in. Are you in stage 1, fighting the resistance, forcing yourself to practice? Honor where you are. The fact that you're practicing at all, despite the discomfort, is profound. Are you in stage 2, where it's become habit but hasn't yet transformed your identity? Celebrate this accomplishment and know that deeper levels await. Are you in stage 3, where generosity is becoming natural and spontaneous? Recognize this as a major milestone and trust that embodiment is emerging. Or are you in stage 4, living in flow, embodying abundance? If so, your work now is to maintain this state, to deepen it, to let it permeate every area of your life. Wherever you are, know that you're exactly where you need to be. The journey from practice to identity, from doing to being, is unfolding perfectly. Each day of giving, each act of circulation, each override of scarcity is moving you closer to the truth. You are not someone who needs to practice abundance. You are abundance itself, recognizing and expressing your true nature. And tomorrow, when you wake, you'll continue this sacred work of remembering and embodying who you really are. Chapter 10. Living as Abundance, Embodied, Your New Paradigm. You have arrived at the culmination of this journey, and yet you stand at the beginning of something infinitely more expansive. Everything you've learned, every principle you've absorbed, every practice you've committed to, all of it has been preparation for this moment. The moment when you stop seeking abundance and start being abundance. The moment when you recognize that you are not a separate entity trying to attract prosperity from an external universe, but rather an expression of the universe itself, a focal point through which infinite creative potential manifests in material form. This is not metaphor. This is not spiritual poetry. This is the literal truth of your existence, and living from this truth is what transforms everything. You are not becoming abundant. You are remembering that you have always been abundant, that abundance is not a state to achieve, but a reality to acknowledge, that the infinite flow of Shepa has been moving through you since the moment of your conception, and will continue until your final breath and beyond. Let's begin with the most fundamental understanding. There is only one substance in the universe, and that substance is consciousness. The ancient Kabbalists called it Ein Sof, the infinite. Quantum physicists describe it as the unified field, the ground state from which all matter and energy emerge. Different names for the same truth. Reality is not made of separate things competing for limited resources. Reality is one infinite consciousness expressing itself in countless forms, and you are one of those forms. Not a separate form struggling against other forms, but a temporary localization of the infinite itself. When you truly grasp this, when you feel it in your bones, and not just understand it in your mind, your entire relationship with abundance transforms instantaneously. You stop trying to get abundance from the world and start allowing abundance to flow through you into the world. You stop being a beggar and become a benefactor. You stop being effect and become cause. This shift from seeking to being is the ultimate transformation that Tzedakah facilitates. Every time you give, you're declaring energetically, I am not separate from the source. I am not dependent on limited material resources. I am connected to infinite supply, and I prove this connection through my willingness to circulate freely. And this declaration, made consistently over time, rewrites your subconscious identity at the deepest level. You literally become a different person, not through changing your thoughts or visualizing different outcomes, but through embodied practice that reprograms your nervous system, your energy field, your electromagnetic signature. You become someone who knows, not believes, not hopes, but knows that they are a channel of infinite abundance. And when you know this with your entire being, reality reorganizes itself to reflect this knowing. Opportunities appear, resources flow, synchronicities multiply, not because you manipulated the universe, but because you aligned with how the universe actually works. Now, living as abundance embodied means something very specific and practical. It means that your default response to every situation is generosity rather than scarcity. When you see a need, your first impulse is, how can I help? Rather than, that's not my problem. When money comes to you, your first thought is, how shall I circulate this? Rather than, how can I hold on to this? When you're faced with a decision, you ask, what would serve the highest good? Rather than, what protects my interests? This doesn't mean you become a doormat. This doesn't mean you ignore your genuine needs. This doesn't mean you give everything away until you have nothing. It means you operate from a fundamentally different premise about the nature of reality. You operate from the premise that there is always enough, that the universe is inherently generous, that your role is to participate in flow rather than to extract from scarcity. Let me paint you a picture of what this actually looks like in daily life. You wake up in the morning, and your first awareness is gratitude. Not forced gratitude, not positive thinking, but genuine appreciation for the abundance that already surrounds you. The breath in your lungs, the bed beneath your body, the consciousness that allows you to experience existence. You recognize these as gifts from the infinite source, and this recognition opens your heart. As you move through your morning, you're alert to opportunities to give. Maybe you send a message of encouragement to someone who's been on your mind. Maybe you leave a larger tip than necessary for your coffee. Maybe you transfer money to a cause you care about before you do anything else with your income. These aren't obligations on a checklist. They're natural expressions of your abundant state. You're not trying to be generous. You are generous. It's who you are. Throughout your day, you interact with people and situations from this foundation of abundance. When someone cuts you off in traffic, instead of reacting with anger, you send them a silent blessing. Maybe they're rushing to the hospital. Maybe they're having the worst day of their life. You give them the benefit of the doubt because giving is your nature. When a colleague asks for help with a project, you say yes if you can, because helping is how you participate in the flow. When you're presented with a business opportunity, you evaluate it not just from what do I get, but from what value can I create. You're not naive. You're not ignoring practical considerations, but your fundamental orientation is toward contribution rather than extraction, toward what you can give rather than what you can take. And this orientation, this state of being, creates a gravitational field around you that attracts opportunity, resources, and support in ways that someone operating from scarcity could never experience. In your relationships, you are the person who gives first. You reach out. You initiate. You offer value before asking for it. You listen deeply. You show up fully. You invest in people without calculating exact reciprocity. This doesn't mean you tolerate abuse or one-sided relationships. It means your default is generosity, and you trust that the universe will match your giving with receiving, even if it doesn't come from the same person or in the same form. You've learned from your Tzedakah practice that giving and receiving are both movements of the same flow, and you don't need to control exactly how the flow moves. You just need to keep your channels open in both directions. So you give love, attention, support, resources freely, and you receive them with equal grace, trusting that the balance will always maintain itself when you're aligned with the flow. Financially, you live with a completely different relationship to money than most people. Money comes and money goes, and you witness both with equanimity. When money arrives, you feel grateful, and you immediately circulate a portion. Your maaser flows out automatically because you've integrated this practice so deeply that it's not even a decision anymore. It's just what happens. Water flows downhill. Your heart beats. Money circulates through you. These are all natural processes that don't require effort or deliberation. You invest wisely. You plan prudently. You take care of practical responsibilities. But underneath all of these actions is a fundamental trust that you will always have what you need because you're connected to infinite supply. You don't hoard in fear of future scarcity. You don't spend recklessly in denial of practical reality. You exist in a balanced flow state where you're simultaneously responsible and trusting, practical and surrendered. This state of abundance embodiment affects every area of your life, not just finances. Your health improves because you're not constantly flooding your system with stress hormones triggered by scarcity thinking. Your relationships deepen because you're not operating from neediness or fear of abandonment. Your creativity expands because you're not constricted by worry about survival. Your intuition sharpens because you're not drowning out subtle guidance with the noise of anxiety. You become more fully yourself, more fully alive, more fully present. Because abundance isn't just about money. It's about life force, creative energy, the animating power that flows through all existence. And when you're not blocking that flow with fear and contraction, it moves through you with extraordinary vitality. But let's be honest about something important. Living as abundance embodied doesn't mean you never face challenges. It doesn't mean you never experience loss or difficulty or periods where money is tight. What it means is that you face these experiences from a completely different state of consciousness. When challenges arise, you don't interpret them as evidence that the universe is against you or that your abundance practice has failed. You recognize them as temporary fluctuations in the flow, as opportunities for deeper trust, as invitations to practice your knowing at a higher level. You've learned through your Tzedakah journey that the flow includes ebbs and tides, contractions and expansions, and that both movements are necessary for the health of the whole system. So when you're in an ebb, you don't panic. You maintain your practice. You continue to give, perhaps smaller amounts, but with the same consciousness. You trust that the tide will turn because tides always turn. And this trust, this unshakable knowing that you're held by infinite abundance, regardless of current circumstances, is what carries you through difficulties that would devastate someone operating from scarcity consciousness. I want to share with you a vision of what becomes possible when you live from this paradigm fully. Imagine waking up every day without financial anxiety, not because you have so much money that you couldn't possibly spend it all, but because you've transcended the entire relationship with money that creates anxiety. You know you're taken care of. You know the universe provides. You know you're a channel of infinite supply, This knowing isn't based on your bank balance. It's based on your identity as an expression of infinite consciousness. So you move through life with a lightness, a freedom, a joy that has nothing to do with your material circumstances and everything to do with your state of being. You make decisions from inspiration rather than desperation. You create from possibility rather than from need. You relate to others from wholeness rather than from lack. And this internal state radiates outward, affecting everything and everyone around you. People feel your energy and want to be near it. They want to work with you, collaborate with you, support you, because your abundance consciousness is contagious. You're not taking from them. You're giving to them simply by being who you are. Opportunities seek you out because you're broadcasting a frequency that matches high-level possibilities. Money flows to you through unexpected channels because you're open to receiving from infinite sources rather than fixated on limited known sources. Your life becomes characterized by grace, by synchronicity, by events that feel magical but are actually just the natural result of being in alignment with how reality actually operates. You're not special. You're not lucky. You're simply awake to the truth that everyone has access to, but most people never discover. You are the abundance you've been seeking. Now let's talk about your role in the larger picture, because abundance embodiment isn't just for your personal benefit. When you become a clear channel of Shefa, when you live as abundance incarnated, you serve a crucial function in the collective evolution of consciousness. You become a beacon, a demonstration, a living proof that there's another way to exist in the world. Most people are trapped in scarcity consciousness, fighting over limited resources, anxious about survival, disconnected from the source. They don't know there's an alternative because they've never seen it modeled. But when you show up as someone who gives freely, who trusts deeply, who lives from abundance regardless of circumstances, you crack open a possibility in their awareness. You plant a seed. Maybe they won't water it immediately. Maybe it will sit dormant for years. But somewhere in their consciousness, they've now seen that it's possible to live differently. And that seeing can change everything. Your Tzedakah practice, your abundance embodiment, ripples out far beyond the immediate recipients of your giving. Every person you help, every cause you support, every act of generosity you perform sends waves through the quantum field that affect the whole. The mother you help with groceries goes home and is more patient with her children because her stress has decreased. Those children grow up slightly less traumatized, slightly more capable of love. They pass that capacity to their children. 3 generations later, people who never knew you existed are living better lives because of a $20 grocery contribution you made without thinking twice. This isn't exaggeration. This is how energy works. Everything is connected. Every action creates ripples. And when your actions are aligned with abundance, generosity, and flow, those ripples carry that frequency outward, gradually transforming the collective consciousness. But your impact isn't just through your actions. It's through your being. The electromagnetic field of your heart, which we discussed earlier in this book, extends several feet beyond your body. When that field is coherent, when you're in a state of abundance and generosity, everyone who comes near you is affected by that frequency. Studies have shown that one person in heart coherence can influence the heart rhythms of people around them, creating what researchers call physiological coupling. You literally tune other people's nervous systems to the frequency you're broadcasting. So when you walk through the world in a state of abundance embodiment, you're not just helping people through your actions. You're elevating their state through your presence. You're offering them a vibrational template of what's possible, and even if they're not conscious of it, their system recognizes it, resonates with it, begins to entrain to it. This is why the work you've done through this audiobook is so important, and why continuing your practice is essential. You're not just improving your own life. You're contributing to a critical mass of abundance consciousness that humanity desperately needs. We're at a pivotal point in our collective evolution. The old paradigm of scarcity, competition, and separation is collapsing. It's creating all the chaos and disruption you see in the world. But something new is emerging, a consciousness of unity, cooperation, and shared abundance. Every person who makes the shift from scarcity to abundance consciousness accelerates this collective transformation. You are part of a global awakening, whether you realize it or not. Your Tzedakah practice isn't just personal spiritual development. It's revolutionary action. You're helping to birth a new world through the way you choose to be. So what does all of this mean for you, practically, moving forward from this moment? It means you have a choice to make, and you'll continue making this choice every single day for the rest of your life. The choice is simple but profound. Will you live from scarcity or from abundance? Will you operate as a closed system trying to accumulate and protect, or as an open channel allowing infinite flow? Will you be driven by fear of not having enough, or will you be guided by trust in infinite supply? This isn't a one-time decision. It's a moment-by-moment practice, a continuous choosing of your highest truth over your conditioned fear. Some days it will be easy. Some days it will be hard. Some days you'll forget and fall back into old patterns. And that's okay. The practice isn't about perfection. It's about direction. As long as you're oriented toward abundance, toward generosity, toward trust, you're on the path. And every time you choose abundance over scarcity, you strengthen that pathway until it becomes your default. Here's what I want you to commit to as you move forward. Continue your Tzedakah practice. Make it non-negotiable. Let it be the foundation upon which you build everything else in your life. Give your maaser first, before anything else, as an act of trust and alignment. Practice receiving with the same consciousness you practice giving, completing the circuit and allowing flow in both directions. Notice when scarcity thinking arises and consciously choose a different response. Cultivate gratitude for the abundance that already exists in your life, training your awareness to see blessings rather than deficits. Surround yourself with people who support your abundance consciousness, and gently release relationships that pull you back into scarcity. Read materials, listen to teachings, immerse yourself in ideas that reinforce the truth you're embodying, and most importantly, be patient and compassionate with yourself as you continue this integration. I also want you to understand that this is not the end of your journey. It's truly the beginning. Everything you've learned in this audiobook has prepared you for a life of continuously deepening into abundance. Consciousness. There are levels upon levels, depths upon depths. You could practice Tzedakah for 50 years and still discover new dimensions of the principle. This isn't because the principle is complicated. It's because it's infinite. It's a doorway into the nature of reality itself, and reality is inexhaustible in its depth and mystery. So don't think, I've completed the audiobook. Now I know everything about Tzedakah. Think instead, I've taken the first steps into a lifelong exploration of what it means to be a channel of divine abundance. Approach your practice with curiosity, with wonder, With a beginner's mind that remains open to new insights and deeper understanding, let me offer you a practice for integrating everything you've learned, something you can do tonight and every night moving forward. As you prepare for sleep, take a few moments to review your day through the lens of abundance. Where did you give? Acknowledge those moments with gratitude. Where did you receive? Acknowledge those moments with equal gratitude. Where did you contract into scarcity? Notice without judgment, and imagine yourself responding differently next time. Where did you trust the flow? Celebrate that trust. And then, as you drift towards sleep, visualize the next day unfolding from a state of complete abundance embodiment. See yourself waking up grateful, moving through your day generous, interacting with people from overflow, handling challenges with trust, going to sleep fulfilled. This nightly practice does two things. It reinforces your abundance identity through repetition, and it programs your subconscious mind to create experiences that match your vision. Finally, I want to leave you with a truth that encompasses everything we've explored together. You are not separate from God, from the universe, from the infinite source of all creation. You are that source, temporarily localized in this particular body, this particular life, this particular moment in time. And the nature of that source is absolute, infinite, inexhaustible abundance. Not abundance of money only, but abundance of love, of creativity, of life force, of possibility, of consciousness itself. When you practice Tzedakah, when you give freely and receive openly, when you circulate resources instead of hoarding them, you're not trying to create abundance. You're simply removing the obstacles to recognizing and expressing the abundance that you already are. You're clearing the channels that have been blocked by fear and conditioned scarcity. You're remembering your true nature. And here's the beautiful paradox. The more you give, the more you remember. The more you circulate, the more you recognize yourself as the flow itself. The more you practice being a channel, the more you realize you've always been a channel, that there's nothing else you could possibly be. A wave is not separate from the ocean trying to become oceanic. It is the ocean, temporarily expressing in a particular form. You are not separate from abundance trying to attract it. You are abundance itself, recognizing and expressing your infinite nature. This recognition is the ultimate transformation. This is what it means to live as abundance embodied. Not having abundance, not getting abundance. Being abundance. As you listen to these final words before drifting into sleep, let them sink deep into your subconscious mind. You are abundant. You have always been abundant. You will always be abundant. Not because of what you have or don't have. Not because of what you earn or don't earn, but because of what you are. A temporary, individualized expression of infinite creative consciousness. And the practice of Tzedakah is simply your way of remembering this truth, of living this truth, of being this truth in every moment of your existence. The universe is waiting for you to wake up to your own abundance. It's been waiting your entire life. It will support you in ways you cannot imagine as you step fully into this knowing. Every resource you need will appear. Every door you need to walk through will open. Every person you need to meet will cross your path. Not because you're special or chosen or lucky, but because this is what happens when a being aligns fully with the flow of Shepa, when a channel clears completely and allows infinite abundance to move through unobstructed. Tomorrow, when you wake as abundance embodied. You wake as a conscious channel of infinite supply. You wake as someone who gives because giving is their nature, who receives because receiving completes the flow, who trusts because trust is alignment with truth. You are not beginning a practice tomorrow. You are continuing to live from the truth you've always been. Money will come and money will go. Circumstances will change. Challenges will arise and resolve. But through it all, you will remain what you've always been. Infinite abundance expressing in finite form, divine generosity flowing through human experience, the universe loving itself through your particular existence. This is not aspiration. This is recognition. This is not becoming. This is being. You are abundance. You are the flow. You are the blessing you've been seeking. And now you know it, and nothing will ever be the same. Sleep deeply tonight, knowing you are held by infinite love and supplied by infinite abundance. Dream of the reality you're creating through your conscious practice and embodied knowing, and wake tomorrow ready to give, to receive, to circulate, to flow, to be the channel of blessing that you were always meant to be. The windows of heaven are open above you. Shepa is pouring forth without ceasing. Your only task is to allow it to flow through you into the world, blessing everyone and everything it touches, including and especially you. This is Tzedakah. This is your life. This is who you are. And so it is.